economics. You understand? What do you understand by the concept of economics? What do you understand by economics? When you go to the markets, you want to earn a living, you can go to the market and set up a shop, isn't it? And be selling jewelries. Is it not? Jewelries. Why? Because you think that people will need jewelries. Ladies want to wear jewelries, isn't it? During marriages and during ceremonies, people want to look good, so they wear jewelries, is it not? So you go to the market, you open up a shop, and you start doing what? Selling what? Jewelries. So that you can make what? Money. Is it not? You make money. Then the money you make from the jewelry sales, you can use it to cater for your other needs. You can use it to do what? Cater for your other needs. You can use it to pay your house rent. Is it not? You can use it to pay for the shop rent. You can use it to pay for children's school fees. You can use it to do what? Buy food. Can you see that? You work to do what? Earn a living. So the whole cycle of what you're doing is known as economics. The whole cycle of what you're doing is known as what? Economics. Is that clear? So economics has a lot to do with your being able to stay alive, knowing what people want, studying of the behavior of people. You come to Gwagwalada, the kind of business that is best suits Gwagwalada might not be the same that suits town. Is that not clear? You go to the village, what kind of thing are they doing in the village? Farming. Is it not? Farming. That's what they normally do in the village. Now when you come to town, they are doing a sort of other thing to what? Earn a living. The people in the village, are they earning a living? They are earning a living, isn't it? But they are doing a different sort of things. They are doing farming and some basic things. But we in town, we also earning a living. Is that not clear? Working in construction company, in school and other things. So both of them are doing what? Earning a living. They are doing things. And those things are under what? Economics. Is that clear? Now, but we have a general definition of economics. We have a what? General definition of economics. And that definition is the definition by a man known as Professor Leonard Robbins. By a man known as who? Professor Leonard Robbins. And he says that economics is defined as the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. This is the general definition of what? Economics. And you're supposed to know this definition as an economics student. Is that clear? And JAMB is going to ask you, which of the following is not a definition of economics? And they will give you different kinds of definitions, like buying and selling. Buying and selling is just one aspect of economics. Is that clear? Production of goods and services, one aspect of economics. Is that clear? Marketing, one aspect of economics. Now, when you say economics is the science which studies human behavior as a relationship between heirs and scarce means which have alternative uses. That is a complete definition of what? Economics. This is a what? Complete definition of economics. Is that clear? So, whenever you're asked what is economics, this is what you're supposed to define economics as. And you can see the components of this definition. Number one, economics is a what? Science. There are some courses that we call pure science, and there are some that we call social sciences. Is it not? Pure science, give me an example of pure science course. Medicine. Or in some sort of subjects, give me an example of pure science subject. Physics, chemistry, biology, all those are pure science. You understand? But when you talk about social science, you talk about what? Social science studies the behavior of human beings. You understand? What am I? This guy is expected to like to wear trousers. You understand? It's a science, but it's studying what behavior. I like wearing baggy jeans and trousers and sweater. So let me go as a company and start producing baggy jeans because people in Abuja like wearing baggy jeans. Is that clear? Study of the behavior, science of behavior. So that's what we call economics. So you see, economics is defined as a science that studies human behavior. Is that clear? If you don't know what human beings want, you will not know the right thing to produce and make more money. You see, Dangote is the richest man in Africa. He's producing cement. Africa is the developing world. We need cement to build, isn't it? He's producing rice. Everybody wants to eat food. So you need to study the behavior of human beings to know what best to produce in order to make more money. And when you're making more money and earning a living, you're living in what we call what? Economics. Is that clear? So economics is the science that studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means. Ends, your wants. Means are the things you use in solving your wants. And these means actually have alternative uses. Is that clear? Those things you use to satisfy wants, they have alternative uses. You can use them for other things. There are some things that you can use as food. You can also use them as drugs. You understand? So you make this decision on, do I use it as a drug or do I consume it as food? So all those decisions, you make them under what? Economics. You make them under what? Economics. Now we're going to look at basic concepts in economics. Basic concepts in economics. There are some terms that you keep using whenever you're studying economics. There are some what? Terms that you keep using when you study economics. One of them is wants. One of them is what? Wants. Wants or wants. What is wants? Something you need. You understand? That's the basic definition. But there is a difference between want and need. I hope you know. Like food, you need food, isn't it? Without food, you cannot survive. Food is something you need. But you want a car, isn't it? Without car, can you survive? Yes, you can survive. But without food, you cannot survive, isn't it not? Yeah. But in economics, all those things you need, we call them what? Want. We call them what? Want. We call them what? Want or desire. But in English, we try to differentiate between what you want and what you need. Is it not? Your mother will tell you that you need education. Or you want fancy clothes. Is it not? But the basic one that you know that you need is what? Education. But without education, you find it difficult to survive in later stages in life. Is it not clear? So want may be defined as insatiable desire or need by human beings to own goods and services. Is that clear? Your desire to own things, that is what? Want. You desire to have a fancy car. You desire to have food. You desire to have shelter. That is what? Want. Is that clear? So right along is the insatiable desire or need of human beings to own goods and services. That give satisfaction. That's what want is. Want is the insatiable desire or need of human beings to own goods and services that give satisfaction. That is what want is. Now we'll talk about scarcity. That's another term. Scarcity. Scarcity. What is scarcity? When do you say that something is scarce? What's that mean? Bookie. When do you say that something is scarce? Good. It's not plenty. It's not easily seen. You understand? Your friend will come around and say, hey, Bookie, this scarce this time around. It's scarce. What does it mean? You know they show big face again. Is it not? That's it. Scarce. Scarce. Something that you cannot see easily. You cannot come by it easily. Is it not? Basic goods and services are normally, some goods and services are normally scarce. Is it not? Like when you finish university, can you easily get a job? Job is scarce. You understand? So you have to be very competitive for you to be able to get the little one that is available. And that is how wealth is. Money. You can easily go and find money. It has some elements of scarcity in it. You understand? So you see that those goods and all those things that you see, there has to be some elements of scarcity, and that makes it economics. Is that clear? So, right along, scarcity is the limited supply of resources. The limited supply of resources which are used for satisfaction of unlimited ones used in the satisfaction of unlimited wants. Can you see the difference? Your wants are unlimited, but the resources to satisfy them are what? Limited. They have limits. That is scarcity. Scarcity. That is scarcity. When the supply of something is not there, plenty, you understand? When the supply is not much, we call it, we say that stuff is scarce. Then number 3 concept is what we call choice. Is what we call what? Choice. Okay, what do you understand by choice? Good. Choice is a what? System of selecting or what? Choosing. Selecting or choosing one out of a number of alternatives. One out of a number of alternatives. Choice. In economics, you must make choice. In economics, you must do what? Make choice. Instead of buying a car, and I have house rent to pay, I have food to buy, let me just go and buy a tricycle so that I have an extra change and use it and pay for my house rent. You say that? That is an economic decision. So you must have the ability to do what? Choose. Ability to do what? Choose, and that is called choice. So choice is the system of selecting or choosing one out of a number of what? Alternatives. Write it. Out of a number of alternatives. Now we look at another concept known as opportunity cost. Known as what? Opportunity cost. That's another concept. What is opportunity cost? Expression of cost in terms of alternative. Write it. Is the expression of cost in terms of forgone alternative. That's what opportunity cost is. The expression of cost in terms of forgone alternative. Expression of cost in terms of forgone alternative. And I'm going to explain what forgone alternative means. Is that clear? Now, Bookie, you have 100 naira. want to have a watch. This is your
Okay,
case
you
of
have
watch. Want to buy a sandal, nice one. Want to buy what again? Want to buy a necklace. You have 1,000 naira. Want to buy all this, and possibly you want to buy a sunglass. And the watch is 500 naira. The sandal is the watch is 400. No, the watch is 600. The sandal is 400. The necklace is 800, and the sunglass is 200. Can you see this? How many of these goods or commodities can you buy with 1,000? How many? 2 at a time, is it not? So you can pick out 2 at a time. Is that clear? You cannot buy the whole. So you have to make choice. You have to make what? You have to make what? You see how choice comes. All these things are classified from the concept that we said so far. All these things are classified as your what? All these things are your what? Wants. Are they not your wants? They are the things you want, is it not? But the means of satisfying these wants is what? The means of satisfying these wants is what? Is scarce. Because if money is not scarce, you will have even 1 million, you can buy everything you want, is it not? But because it's not enough, it is what? Scarce. Your wants, the means to satisfy your wants are what? Scarce. So you have to want, you have to what? Choose. You have to make choice. So now, you're choosing the 2 that can best be bought with 1,000, is it not? So in choosing, you have to have what we call scale of preference. What are the things you prefer more? What are the things that you cannot go out with? You need sandals, isn't it? Huh? You can say, let me forget about necklace and sunglasses and watch for now. Let me buy sandals because once I'm stepping out of my house, I have to wear something in my leg, is it not? So, sandal is the number 1 in your what? Scale of preference. Is that clear? So after picking sandal now, you will not pick something else that will match this 1,000. What is that? Maybe a watch. Is it? Is it? Now, this one that you pick and you leave this, the one that is left is known as the what? Opportunity cost. The one that is left is known as the what? Opportunity cost. Is that clear? The one that you left is known as the what? Opportunity cost. And that's why it says the expression of cost in terms of what? Forgone alternative. The alternative that you've done was forgone. Is that clear? Is that clear? So the ones you left, in order to satisfy the basic need, is the word opportunity cost. Is that clear? Is that clear? Good. Good. Arranging what you want to buy in order of their need, in order of need. So let's put it. Okay. We'll explain it later. It's now not the basic concept. But do you understand what scale of preference is now? Scale of preference simply means arranging your wants, you understand, in their order of importance. The one that is more important will be up. Is that clear? So now we look at production. What is production? In economics, production is the various economic activities. Production is the various economics activities aimed at the creation of goods and services. Aimed at the creation of goods and services, and the distribution of these to the final consumer, and the distribution of these to the final consumers. Final what? Consumers for the satisfaction of human wants. For the satisfaction of human wants. That is what production is. The various economic activities which is used in the word production of goods and services. Exactly. That's what production is. Production is not only when you're producing goods. Exactly. When you're producing maybe gari, it does not stop there. Production also involves you getting the gari to the person that needs it. Exactly. So it includes the transportation. You transport the gari from the village to where they can buy it. Exactly. It also includes the person that brings the gari to you. You understand the definition?
That's right.
Production is the various economic activities. Everything in economy that comprises of the activities that is aimed at the creation of what? Goods and what? Services. Can you see these two? You know the difference between goods and services. Can you tell me the difference between goods and services? Good. Goods are the tangible products. You can touch them. This is a good. Is it not? Goods. Shirt, my shirt, your shirt. All those things are goods. Is it not? But in the house, you get light, electricity. That is services. You understand? Electricity. You're not saying it, but you're getting it. And it's useful to you. You want to make call. Are you seeing the airtime? Are you feeling it? But you use the services. You use their service. Is it not? So when you come here, you say, hey, there is no service here. There is no service. Service is serving you for a purpose, but you cannot feel it physically. Yeah, explain me. Instead of the big explanation, right? Yes, you can have your own explanation, exactly. This is just like the composite definition. You understand? But when you now understand it, you cannot put it in your own way. And you can use it. But it's very important that you understand the basic things, like it must be aimed at what? It must be an economic activity aimed at creation of what? Goods and services. And distribution of these goods. After producing it, you have to distribute it so that you get to the final end users. Is it not? So that complete process of act is known as what? Production. It's known as what? Production. Yes. Yes, welcome. Today we are going to be learning about economic problems. We are going to be learning about what? Economic problems. And I explain what economics is all about, you understand? Trying to study human beings so that you can satisfy their wants with the limited resources that you have. Is it not? That is economics. The science that studies the human behavior. Now, I told us that the means to satisfy the wants are scarce. The means those commodities, those things that you use in satisfying what you need. Exactly. If you need something, you need money to satisfy, is it not? That money is a means to satisfy your wants of buying a necklace or buying a shoe. You understand? But you see that money is scarce. You cannot easily find money. But and even it's easy for you to find money. You can buy anything. If you go to your house, you see a car, you see a Lamborghini, you see a Ferrari, you have jacuzzi in your, you have everything you want. Is it not? But money is scarce, so you cannot have everything you want. So in trying to find money to satisfy all your wants, you encounter what we call economic problems. You encounter what we call what? Economic problems. So economic problems are the problems people meet in the society while attempting to satisfy their numerous wants with the limited resources available. Exactly. So that problem you meet whenever you're trying to solve all your problems, you want to pay your school fees. How can I make money to pay school fees? hey, let me start selling recharge card. Let me start selling recharge card. Oh yeah, do I sell recharge card or do I go and sell shoe? You understand? Oh, let me start producing Gary. Do I produce Gary or do I produce apple? You understand? You ask yourself, problem of what to produce in order for you to solve your problem and make money and use it in solving your problem. Is that clear? So economic problems are those problems that you meet in the society when you are attempting to satisfy your numerous wants with the available resources. There are 3 economic problems. In economics, we have what? 3 economic problems. There are 3 of them. Is that clear? And those 3 are problems of what? Thank you. What to produce. Then number 2 is what? How to produce, huh? How to produce. Number 3 is for whom. For whom to what? Produce. So these are the 3 basic economic problems. These are the what? 3 basic economic problems. These are the what? 3 basic economic problems. Is that clear? So as an economic student, you should know these 3 problems. What to produce. First of all, you need to know what to produce. To make more money, what do I produce? Do I start producing Gary or apple or shoe? You understand? If you can't produce what people don't need, will you make enough money? No. So you have to solve this first problem of what to produce. How to produce? How do I produce the Gary? Now that I've chosen to produce Gary, how do I produce the Gary? Should I use that frying pan or should I use mechanized oven? Which one is easy? Which one will reduce the cost so that I'll make more money? Is that clear? That's answering the problem of how to produce. Now, for whom to produce? For whom? If I'm producing this Gary, do I grind it very well and package it very well so that people in town, people in the city will buy? Or do I do the one that only people in the village will buy? Which one will I make more money producing? Is that clear? If I want to be selling clothes, do I sell clothes for old people or do I sell for young people? Which one goes market? Is that clear? That's the problem of what? For whom to produce. And you see the 3 problems of economics. Once you're able to solve these 3 problems, you see that you start making a living very well. If you are producing the goods that people want or you're rendering the kind of services that people want, you see customers will be coming. And once customers are coming, you make more money. Is that clear? Is that clear? So these are the 3 basic economic problems, and that's the source problem that you encounter in economics. Is that clear? Yes. Welcome. Earlier we looked at what economics is it not? What did we say economic is? Like social science, we studies what? Human behavior. As a relationship between what? Ends and scarce means which have what? Alternative what? Uses. Is it not? Is that not? That's the definition of what? Economics. And we went on to define the various terms used in economics, like want. What did we say want is? Things you need. Is it not? Then we say choice. What is choice? Choice. The act of selecting from different things. Is it not? The act of choosing. Then we learned about scarcity. Scarce. What is scarce? It's not readily out there. Then we looked at opportunity cost. What is opportunity cost? The alternative that is left unpicked. You understand? The alternatives that are left unchosen when you're picking from your scale of preference, is it not? So those are the things we looked at, isn't it? Today we are going to look at the economic systems. What are the types of economic systems that we have in the world? In some countries, when you go there, you find out that government is controlling everything. You don't need to work. Like in the socialist Cuba, There's a country called Cuba. You understand? You don't need to own your private business. You work for the government. In the end of the day, the government pays you. Is that clear? But in some economies, like in the USA, you find out that the people own most of the business. You understand? They just pay tax to the government. Is that clear? If you come to an economy like the one we have in Nigeria, government owns some things and some things are owned by individuals. Is that not clear? Is that not so? Like the NNPC is owned by what? Is it the government or individual? Government. But we have other oil companies that are owned by individuals, like Total, Health, isn't it? Good. So your economy can either be mixed economy, capitalism, or what? Socialism. Is that clear? Either mixed economy, capitalism, or socialism. We did something like that in government, isn't it? Good. Lots of new. So mixed economy is an economy in which both public and private ownership of, where there is what? Both public and private ownership of means of production and distribution exist together in a country. You understand? Like in Nigeria, both the public and the private people, they own the means of production and distribution. Capitalism or free market economy is a type in which the means of production and distribution are owned by private individuals. Is that clear? When you talk about capitalism, it is owned by what? Private individuals. Can you see that? Capitalism owned by what? Private individuals. Socialism, socialism or centrally planned economy, the means of production and distribution is controlled by the what? State or government. You understand? Or the what? Public sector. Is that clear? So in capitalism, you have private individuals handling the means of production and distribution. In socialism, you have public individuals or the state. Whereas in mixed economy, you have what? Both the what? What do we have in mixed economy? Good, both the private and the public. Is that clear? Can you tell me the difference now if I ask you? So what are the three types of economic system about? Mixed economy, capitalism, and socialism. So what are the differences? Good. Good. Government or states. Isn't it very simple? Isn't it very simple? It is. So we are going to look at the features of the various kinds of economic system. What are the features of the various kinds of economic system? Features of the economic system. What do you understand by the term features? Characteristics, is it not? Characteristics. So number one, what are the features of well, let's start with capitalism. What are the features of capitalism? What are the kind of things that you see in a country and you say this country is practicing capitalism? What are the things? Number one is that there is private ownership of properties. Number one is what? Private ownership of what? Properties. We see that most properties are owned by private individuals. If you go to America, you see Google owning some property, you see Apple, Facebook, individuals mostly. You understand? Number two, there is what we call existence of competition. There is what? Existence of what? Competition. If you go to America now, you see the tech giants like Google and Facebook, Apple, all of them are competing between each other. Is that not so? When you buy phone, you buy Techno, you buy Samsung, they are similar. You understand? One is trying to make his own application to be more better. Also, between Samsung and Techno, which one is of more quality? Samsung is more quality, but it's costlier. But that's why plenty of people have Techno, isn't it? But both of them have Android applications and they can be used very well, is it not? So there is always competition. Then there is what we call maximization of profit. There is what? Maximization of profit. Who can tell me the two telecommunication giants in Nigeria that are always competing? Globacom and what? Globacom and what? MTN. Airtel, Etisalat, isn't it? They are competing. All of them also want to make the maximum profit. But you know, if everybody is working for Nigerian government, like those people working in the ministry, is there competition in the ministry? If you go there, they will say, this thing not be your work, or not be government work. Why you dey act like saying that you sabi pass? You understand? That's what they say in government work. Nobody is willing to do extra things. Nobody is willing to do extraordinary things. But if you're working for a private firm, you have to be up and doing. If you're not, they will do what? They will sack you. But government, even if your guy want to sack you, you just look at your guy and say, okay, mind yourself, oh, this thing na your papa work, no be government work. You see the people that are working in government office, they will come to work very late. At the time, if they are doing activity in the village, they will just travel. They will not even take permission. Can you try that in a private institution? If you do it, they will just sack you. Understand? So there is this spirit of competition in private sector. They are trying to improve. You cannot just come there and do anyhow. There is individual satisfaction. Individual what? Satisfaction. Do you know what that means? If you are working for a private, if you are running a capitalism system of government, you go and do what you want. Like me, what am I doing? I'm into ICT and education, is it not? I just chose to. That's what I chose. That's what I derived joy in. I like teaching. When I teach, I'm happy. And that is why I set up this place. But if government say nobody should go and do anything but private, that everybody should go and work, they will just throw me into old school to secondary school and say I must go there and teach. Will I be happy? I will not be happy. One, that I will not be making maximum profit. You understand? Because government will be paying me salary or small amount of money, and some months they will not pay. Is that not what is happening? Salim, some months government are owing they owe their workers, isn't it? So I will not be making profit, and I will not have satisfaction. I will not be happy. But because I'm doing what we call capitalism, I'm on my own. You understand? I'm a private owner of a business. I'm having what we call maximum profit, and I'm having what individual satisfaction. Is that clear? Free market enterprise, that's another thing. There is what we call free market enterprises. Now we look at features of socialism. What are the features of socialism? Can you tell me the features of socialism? What are the type of things that you see in an economy and you say that this is a socialism economy? Number one, there is what we call joint decision making. You understand? Socialism is when government is controlling everything. There is what we call state ownership. State ownership of means of production. So it's the state that owns the factories, the corporations. There is what we call non-market economy. Is that clear? Everything is there for you. There's no need going to stress yourself in trying to market your product. Because your produce is also government produce, and government gives it to everybody. There is non-profit motive. There's what we call what? Non-profit motive. Nobody wants to make profit because you're working for the government. There is promotion of welfare. That's the only good thing here. Promotion of what? Welfare. Because the government will use that money and the work you've done for it to take care of you. There are features of mixed economy, features of mixed economy. How do you know a mixed economy when you see one?
Freedom of choice.
What?
There is what? Freedom of choice. You understand? Freedom of choice. You can choose to work for government or work for yourself, isn't it? Or do any kind of thing you want. There is also joint decision. You can have what we call public-private partnership. There is joint participation of both the government and the private, is it not? Joint participation. You have the government and the private owning the means of production. There is checks and balances. There is what? Checks and what? Balances. Most economy in the world are now tending towards this mixed economy. Because the government check and balance what the private sector do. Because if the private sector, if they are producing any kind of thing, if they want to produce tire, they will go and do tire that is of low quality. The government has to be there. The government has to be there. The government has to be there to monitor what the private sector is doing. Don't leave my class while I'm in the class. Once you leave, you continue staying outside. And there is what we call economic freedom. That's the last feature of mixed economic freedom. Is that clear? Is that clear? So those are the features. Good. Methods of economic analysis. If you want to say that the economy of Nigeria is good, how do you measure? How do you show somebody that the economy of Nigeria is good? You understand? If you are telling us that the economy of America is better than that of Nigeria, or the economy of the United Kingdom is better than that of Ghana, how do you analyze? How do you measure? How do you present it to people so that they will understand? You can do that using what we call basic economic tools. You do that using what we call what? Basic economic tools. So you can analyze, you can do economic analysis to compare the various economy, the kind of market that is moving. You understand? The kind of things that you can produce and leave the other. How do you show people? You do them using what we call basic economic tools. And what are these tools? These tools interpret economic principles in a way that is easy to do what? Understand. They present the data for you, the figures, the fact and figures that make America better than Nigeria. Why would you want to go to America to do business? Why would you want to go to Singapore to buy something instead of buying it in Nigeria? You understand? You use the basic tools to show them. So that when you show, you say, hey, from this thing you've shown me, Singapore is better than China. You understand? What are those tools that you can use in showing? Can you give me an example of one of those tools? Table. You understand? If you put it in a table, you see this country is making this amount of money. Nigeria is making 200,000 in a month from agriculture. America is making 1 million in agriculture. Which country is making more money? America. You understand? You can show it in a table, isn't it? So, what are these basic tools that you can use in showing all this? You can use tables. Table is just one, isn't it? There are many of them. You can use also what? Charts. You can use what? Graphs. You can use what? Mode. You can use median. You can use mean. You can use standard deviation and other ones, etc. Is that clear? So now we are going to take the first basic tool of economic analysis, which is known as what? Table. What is a table? A table is a systematic, orderly arrangement of information, facts or data, using rows and what? Columns, for presentation for easy and what? Better understanding. It is the most common tool for economic analysis. Is that clear? This is what we call a table. This is the way you draw a table, isn't it? Is that not clear? You can say country. You can say revenue for 2017. Is that clear? Close the door. You say country, then you say revenue for 2017. Is that clear? So example of country, you say Ghana. 2 million. Nigeria, 3 million. USA, 10 million. Somali, 1 million.
Oh my.
Which country is making the highest revenue? USA. Which country is making the poorest revenue? Huh? Somalia. Somalia is making only 1 million. Ghana is making 2. You see that? So with this table, you can do what? You can do economic analysis. You can analyze this table and say, you can say the country that is making the biggest money. You understand? Then from this table you can say, I want to go and study in America because in America they have plenty money there. That's why we say, we call it was basic economic analysis was 2. You use them to show what is happening. Have you seen how I've used this table to show the country that is making the highest revenue in 2006? Did you see it? Good. So we are going to be showing more. We're going to be showing more. Okay, it's record. So now, I'm going to draw a table. The table I just drew now is a sketch. So let me draw a perfect table. Table 2.1, right? Table 2.1. This is how you draw a table. You must put the table name. Number of vehicles demanded in a country. This is the table number. Number of vehicles demanded in a country. That's the table you are having. Number of vehicles demanded in a country. Is that clear? This is the table number, and this is the title of the table. Number of vehicles demanded in a country. So you draw the table. We say that table is made up of rows and what? Rows and what? Take your notes. Table is made up of rows and what? Rows and what? It's made up of rows and what? Columns. Rows and what? Columns. Is it not? Rows and what? Columns. Can you see it? Prices of the vehicles in Naira. Number of vehicles demanded. So for the vehicle that costs 50,000 Naira, 800 was demanded. For the vehicle that costs 200,000 Naira, 500 was demanded. For the one that costs 450,000, 300 was demanded. For the one that costs 800,000, 150 was demanded. For the one that costs 1 million, 50 was demanded.
So these are the objects for you. These are the objects for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to explain what a table is. You understand? So this is a given table. You say that a table is a systematic arrangement of facts, is it not? It's arranging these facts in rows and columns. Blossom, what do you understand from this table? Just look at this table. We say that table is a systematic arrangement of facts. You understand? In rows and columns. This is column. Anyone that is vertical is known as column. Whereas the horizontal is known as what? Rows. Every table must pass information. So what is the information this table is passing?
Like opportunity cost.
No. Number one, this table is telling us the number of vehicles that is demanded in a country. You understand? Then when you look at it, you see for the price of 50,000, 800 was demanded. As the price is increasing, what is happening? The quantity demanded becomes low. That's the interpretation of this table. You understand? So if I tell you to interpret this table, you just look at it. After looking at it very well, you tell me that as the prices of the vehicle are increasing, the demand are what reducing. Why? Because if you say now, what are the number of people that are driving Lamborghini or Ferrari in this? Have you ever seen somebody drive Ferrari in Bangladesh? No, because the price of Lamborghini or Ferrari is very what? Very high. But Toyota Pencil Light, you are seeing it always, isn't it? Honda Civic. The demand is high because their prices are low. But for the one that their prices are very high, their demand is what? Low. You see, you can understand these simple facts, these simple economics, demand and supply. You understand? Using what? Using what? Table. No. They are not asking this time. You understand? They will simply ask you, what is a table? You understand? Or they will tell you that the systematic orderly arrangement of information, facts and data using rows and columns for presentation is known as what? Good. You understand? Is that clear? Now we look at another tool. We look at another tool, and that tool is what? Graphs. Look at another tool known as graph. What is a graph? What are graphs? This is a diagram showing functional relationship. Yes. Today we are going to look at another basic economic tool. The first basic economic tool that we looked at is the what? Table. Now we are going to look at another tool that we can use in doing economic analysis, and that is what? Graphs. What are graphs? This is a diagram showing functional relationship. Showing what? Functional relationship between two variables. Any diagram that shows functional relationship between what? Two variables. X and what? Y. Is that clear? That is a graph. Information in the table can be translated into graphs for what? Better understanding. That your table that we have, we can transform it to what? Graph. Is that clear? Examples of graphs are line graphs, pie graphs, bar charts, pictogram. You've been hearing about bar charts, isn't it? Pictograms, line graphs, the example of bar chart. You can make a graph from a table. Is that clear? You can only make a graph from a table. Let's take an instance. Can you give me that table I had before? What is there? Prices, is it not? Then the other side is what? Number of vehicle what? Demanded. Is it not? Those are the two. Then at price of what? What's the first price? At price of 50,000, we have how many? 800. What's the next price? 200,000. What's the this thing? What's the next price? 450. What's the 300? What's the next price? What's the next 150? What's the other one? 1 million. What's the quantity? 50. Can you see this table? You can put this table in form of a graph. How do you put it in form of a graph? I told us that graph is a diagram representing the relationship between two variables, is it not? X and Y. So what are those two variables? Price. The X here is price, isn't it? And the Y is what? Number of vehicles what? Demanded. Is that clear? Then we have 0 here. What are the prices we have? 50 what? 50 what? 50, maybe 100, 200. We have, okay, let's say we have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1,000. Then we'll have, what are the numbers we have? We have 50. We have also 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, blah, blah, blah. At the price of 50, where can we find 50? Is around here, huh? At the price of 50, how many? At the price of 500,000. This is in 100, this is 100,000. You understand?
I got some.
Thousand.
No.
So at the price of 50,000, what is the number? What is the number?
Yeah, looking up this guy. You don't say I see the being now. Guy, don't they buy earphones? Buy something for man. Just
What is the
you don't they buy things now. You don't dare me. Yeah, you don't dare me in life.
At the price of 450.
Yeah,
This
okay,
is
so tell me you
450
now.
at the price of 450.
The world, yeah.
300.
Don't say.
At the price of 800. This is 800, huh? What number? 150 should be around here, huh?
Was but talk about my friends,
Then at the price of 1 million. You have to understand how the principle and the forces of demand and supply work for you to do a very good business. If you are selling clothes and you go and bring the kind of clothes that people around the area, they don't wear it, they don't demand for it, are you going to make sell? You're not going to make sell. You're going to be wasting your time because you're selling products that are not consumable, products that are not demanded for in that very area. Is that clear? You have to sell the one that people are demanding. In music, they call it popular demand. They call it popular demand. But which music are among the popular demand right now in the country? What song is the most popular demand in Nigeria? No. There is a song that almost everybody wants to hear now. But there are songs. Which songs? You guys don't listen to music. There's one music by Ron Town, Mad Over You. There's one by Whiskey, Daddy Yo. That's what is in demand. Everybody wants to listen to them. So it's making airtime, airwaves because of the demand. Everybody wants to have your stuff. You understand? If you're registering JAMB, you see that plenty of people will come around because most people want to register for JAMB, isn't it? The amount of people registering JAMB and the amount of people registering NAPTEP, are they the same? Did you write NAPTEP? Did you write NAPTEP? If you ask in the whole class, you find out that virtually nobody here wrote NAPTEP or is willing to write NAPTEP. But everybody wants to write what? So anybody that is selling JAMB form and the person that is selling NAPTEP form, who will be making more sales? JAMB. Why? Because people are doing what? People are doing what? They are demanding for JAMB. Is that clear? So when you're selling, you make sure that you're selling goods that have high worth, goods that have high worth, so that you can be selling. Is that clear? Is that clear? So what is demand? We say that demand is the ability and willingness to buy a specific quantity of goods and services at a given price and at a particular period of what? Time. Your ability and what? Willingness. Your ability and what? If you're not able, then it is not demand. I explained it before, but like now you might be willing to have a duplex. You're willing to have a Lamborghini. you're willing to drive a Ferrari. You understand? You wish to have all those things. Is that clear? But once you don't have the money to get them, then you're not making any word for it. You're not making any word demand for it. It can only be called demand when you're willing and what? When you're willing and what? Able. When you're willing and what? Able. And what is able? When you talk about ability, what are you talking about? Capability. And you're talking about what? The money. You need to have the money. You cannot come to Nigeria. You know, if you come to this Babylon, everybody here wish to drive Ferrari. You understand? But because of the price of Ferrari that is very costly, are we willing and able to have a Ferrari? But we are not able. So you cannot say that there is low demand for Ferrari in Bogorada, isn't it? It has to be low because we are not able to afford it. But you can talk about high demand of Camry pencil light. You know the motor the car they call Camry pencil light or fish light. You know them? You don't know them. You know it? Camry. That's what Nigerians buy a lot. Because they are willing and what? They are able. They can afford it. With 1 million naira you can get a Camry. 750 you can get one. 650. You understand? Depending on the what's it called? On the model and the what do they call it? How new the car is. You understand? So you can only talk about demand when you are what? Willing and what? Able. Willing and what? Able. To buy at a particular what? Price and at a particular what? Period. Is that clear? And that brings us to what we call the law of demand. Goods that have cheap price. You understand? There is tendency that if you go to market now and you want to buy things and you see the one that is cheaper, it's more likely that you get that cheaper one, isn't it? Because you can easily afford it. The ones that have very high price, do people buy them? Just like I say, Camry. People can afford Camry because of the what? Price. Unlike Ferrari that has very high price. So in essence, you say that the higher the price, the lesser the what? The higher the price, the lesser the what? Demand. Or the higher the demand, the lesser the what? Price. Or the lesser the price, the higher the what? Demand. It's very clever. Things that have very high cost, you see that the demand are very less. But the ones that have low cost, they have what? Higher demand. Isn't it? That's true, isn't it? So, and that's what the law of demand is saying. It's saying that it states that the higher the price, the lower the quantity of goods that will be what? Demanded. All things being equal. All things being equal. You know what all things being equal means? To say KED. All things being what? Equal. Provided everything is equal, it is always there that the higher the price, the lower the quantity what? Demanded. Is that clear? JAMB is always going to ask you. The law of demand states one of the following. It will give plenty statements. So it's your duty to pick out these statements. Is that clear? Another way that this statement could be put is the lower what? What will happen? The what? Higher the quantity demanded. It's clever. It's clever. Now we say all things being equal. We say what? All things being equal. What do we mean by that word? All things being equal. The law will hold under the following assumption. This law, the law of demand, will only hold under the following assumption. The law will hold under the following assumptions. You understand? If these things happen, then you know that things are actually equal. You understand? So number one of this assumption is that there will be no change in taste and preference of the consumer. Right along. There will be no change in taste and preference of the consumer. So if there is a change in taste or preference of the consumer, the law might not hold the way it should. Then number two assumption is that the consumer's income remains constant. The consumer income remains constant. The consumer's income remains constant. If the consumer's income is remaining constant, then the law will hold. Number three is that no very close substitutes of the commodity exists. That no very close substitutes of the commodity exist. There should be no close substitute of the commodity in question existing. Then number four is that the habits of the consumers remain unchanged. The habits of the consumer remains unchanged. The habits of the consumer remains unchanged. And finally, that there is no change in the quality of the product. That there is no change in the quality of the product. That's the last assumption. So provided all things are in place, then the law of demand, which states that the higher the price, the lower the demand, holds. So when we say all things being equal, all things being equal, when we say all things being equal, we actually mean these things. Is that clear? We actually mean that there will be no change in the taste or preference of the customer. The consumer's income remains constant, that no very close substitute of the commodity exists, that the habits of the consumer remains unchanged, that there is no change in the quality of the product. So provided all these things remain constant, the law of demand, which states that the higher the price, the lower the quantity of goods that will be demanded, holds through. Yes, we're going to look at demand schedule and curves. Demand schedule and what? Curves. Demand schedule. What is a demand schedule? A demand schedule is any table. A demand schedule is what? Any table that shows the relationship between the quantity of a particular commodity that a consumer demands at various prices. At various what? Prices. So demand schedule is a table showing the relationship between the prices and the quantity of that commodity demanded. You understand? So any table that you have that shows prices and what? Quantity. That shows what? Prices and what? Quantity. The relationship between the price and quantity is a what? Demand what? Schedule. And we have two types of this demand schedule. We have what we call individual demand schedule and what? Market demand schedule. Individual is for one person, one consumer. Is that clear? So we say individual demand schedule is a table which shows the different quantities of the commodity which an individual or a consumer would purchase at various what? Prices at a particular time. And we're going to show an example of a demand schedule, individual demand schedule, using the following diagram. Using the what? using the what? Following diagram. So whenever you talk about demand schedule, you're going to have a table like this. It's a table that shows what? The what? What does it show? Relationship, isn't it? Between what? Price. Between what? Price. Price per thing in Naira. Price is always in what? Naira. So it shows the relationship between price and what? Quantity demanded. Price and what? Quantity demanded. So number of things per week. Number of things per week. So this table is trying to show us the relationship between the price of one thing and the number that you demand. Let's say the price is 100, the price of one thing, of maybe milk or something. The quantity demanded will be what? 10. If the price is 80, the quantity that will be demanded, will it increase or decrease? It will increase because the price is going down. So the quantity will increase. And that is the law of demand, isn't it? That as the price is decreasing, the quantity will be doing what? Increasing, isn't it? So let's say now that the price is what? Now 60. The quantity will increase more, back to 30. Let's say the price is now 40. What will it do to the quantity? It will increase more to 40. And the price is now as little as 20. What will be the quantity? It will increase to what? 50. Can you see that? So this table we just drew now is known as what? What is the name of this table? Demand what? Schedule. This is an individual what? Demand schedule. Individual demand schedule. Is that clear? So draw the table, sharp. Draw it. Draw it as an example. Write example, then draw it. Then we're going to look at market demand schedule. Market demand schedule. Having done individual demand schedule, we're going to look at market demand schedule. This is also known as aggregates. You can also call it aggregate or total. Or total demand. Or you can also call it composite demand schedule. Composite demand schedule. So you can call it any of these. You either call it market demand schedule, aggregate demand schedule, total demand schedule, or composite demand schedule. And it is actually a schedule or a table of all consumers of a commodity in a market, all consumer of a commodity in a market. Unlike the individual demand schedule that is talking about the individual demand. It's talking about one consumer, a particular consumer. This one is talking about all the consumers in the market. So it's a table that shows the relationship between price and the quantity demanded of all the consumers of a particular commodity in the market. So when you finish the diagram, I'll draw the diagram for market demand schedule. Market demand schedule. I'll draw the diagram for market demand schedule. Good. So I can clean up this and draw the diagram for the. So the other one is talking about, the first one we drew, price and quantity demanded. Just one quantity from one person. But if you're talking about market schedule, you're going to have a table like this. You're going to have a table like this, whereby in the first one, you have what we call price. You always have price, right? Price per team. And the price is always in what? Naira, isn't it? Now you have what we call, you have a line here, and call it quantity demanded. You call it what? Quantity demanded by the following. It's not only one person. So you can have Mr. Obi, the quantity demanded by Mr. Obi, Mr. Ola, quantity demanded by Mr. Ola, Mr. Musa, the quantity demanded by Mr. Musa, Mrs. Edith, the quantity demanded by Mrs. Who? Edith. Then you have what we call total quantity purchased per week. Total quantity purchased per week. So that's what we have in aggregate demand schedule. Is that clear? So let's say that the price of the good commodity is 100. Mr. Obi will demand for 10. Mr. Ola 15. Mr. Musa 30. Mrs. Edith 20. And when the price is 80, Mr. Obi will demand for 20. You see it's increasing. Ola 25. Musa 40. Edith 40. And when the price is now what? 60, Mr. Obi will even increase his own more to 30. Ola 35. Musa 50. Edith 60. And when the price goes further down to 20, Mr. Obi will demand for even more, 50. Mr. Ola will demand for 55. Mr. Musa will demand for 70, and Mrs. Edith will demand for 80. You can see that as the price is reducing, their demands are what? Their demands are increasing. Is that clear? In individual demand, we'll talk about for one person, isn't it? Just price and what? Quantity demanded. But in market demand, we'll talk about price and quantity demanded by different people. You understand? For that very particular goods. Now, what is the total quantity demanded here? 20 plus 30 is 50, plus 10 60, plus this 75. What's the total here? 125. What's the total here? 90. 140. 175. What's the total here? What's the total? 255. Okay, that's by your calculation. But that's how you get the total, by adding up the demands, isn't it? So that you can actually have your price against what? Quantity demanded, just like you had it in the first one. So draw the diagram. Draw the diagram. Let's draw the diagram for the market schedule. This is market demand schedule. Good. We looked at demand schedule. We looked at what? Demand what? Schedule. And we said that demand schedule is what? Demand schedule is the table that shows the relationship between the prices and what? Quantity demanded. Is it not? That's what I said. Once I ask you what is demand schedule, just say table first. Is that clear? The table that shows the relationship between the prices and what various quantity demanded. Now, demand curve is the word graph. The other one is the word table, but this one is a what? Graph. Also showing the same thing, showing the relationship between the price and the what? Quantity demanded of a what? Commodity. Is that clear? So two of them are showing the relationship between price and what? Quantity. Only that this one is a graph, whereas demand schedule is a what? Demand schedule is a what? It's a table. Demand schedule is a what? Table. Demand schedule is a what? Table. Whereas demand curve is a what? Demand curve is a graph. That's the difference between the two of them. Both of them are showing the relationship between the price and what? Quantity demanded. Now, you derive your demand curve from your demand what? Schedule. You can always plot this graph using the table of the demand what? Curve. So let's say you are given this table. This is the table you are given. And I told you that every demand schedule has what? Price. In what? Naira. For Nigeria, it can be in dollar, you understand? Then after the price, what do we have here? Quantity what? Demanded. So let's say at a price of 10 naira, the quantity demanded is what? 5. When the price increases to 20, what will do the quantity? Will it increase or decrease? It will decrease to 4. When the price is 30, this thing is what? 3. When it is 40, it is what? When it is 50, it is what? 1. So this is the demand what? This is the demand what? Huh? Demand schedule. The table is the demand schedule. Whereas the graph is the demand what? Curve. Now you can plot this table to be here. Is that clear? You just draw your vertical and what? Horizontal axis. The vertical axis is the what? Price in naira. The horizontal axis is the what? Quantity demanded. Now, at the price of 10, what is the quantity? At the price of 10, the quantity is what? 5. At the price of 20, what is the quantity? 4. You mark it, isn't it? At the price of 30, what is the quantity? At the price of 40, what is the quantity? At the price of 50, what is the quantity? You mark all of them. Once you mark, you then draw the what? Curve. You then draw the what? Curve. Is that clear? And this is for an individual demand schedule. This is for an individual what? Demand schedule. This is how the curve looks. But if you have what we call market schedule, if you have what? Market schedule, you see that the curve will look like this. This one is a straight line. For market schedule, it's not always a straight line, it moves like this. Is that clear? For market schedule, you have something like this. But for an individual schedule, you have this. So quickly write it down. Okay, it's already written down. Yeah, so we're going to look at factors affecting demand. Factors affecting demand. What are the kind of things that will make you to demand for more things? And what are the kind of things that will make you to demand for less? What are the factors that affect the quantity of a goods that you can demand at a particular point? Number one is price. You know that if the price of goods is very high, will you demand more? You will demand less. Number two is price of other commodities. If you find out that similar commodities, like, do you know you have Ovaltine, you have Milo, you have Bonfita, isn't it? You find out that Milo, they are selling Milo 1,000 naira, and it's Milo that you want to buy initially. But you now find out that other similar commodities to Milo, like Ovaltine and Bonfita, are being sold for 100 naira. Which one will you buy? You go and buy them. So the demand of Milo will do what? Reduce immediately. Whereas the price of the other commodities will do what? I mean, their demand will do what? Increase, because you want to go and buy them. Number three, income of consumer. Income of consumer. if before you were eating masa and small suya, when you were still selling in Gwagwalada market, and all of a sudden you got job in NNPC, will you still be eating masa and small suya? Will you still be eating masa and small suya? Huh? You will start eating better food, isn't it? You might start patronizing Mr. Biggs and all those big places, isn't it? So what happens? The demand for masa and suya does what? Whereas the demand for season 7 food does what? Increases. So your income determines what you buy. Change in the taste of consumer. Change in the what? Taste of consumer. If before you were okay, you understand, in wearing fairly used products, if you were okay with fairly used products, all of a sudden you find out that your friends, when they wear quality things, you like it. What's going to happen to your buying of fairly used products? The demand for it will do what? Increase. Find a better taste. Isn't it? The demand for things that are more newer will do what? Increase, because now you buy new things. Population. Anywhere you go and there are plenty people, demand for things there, is it high or low? High. That's why Nigeria has more markets than most West African countries. Do you know why? Because the population of Nigeria is bigger than most of them. We're almost 200 million, I hope you know. So you see that people want to come to Nigeria and do business. All those big companies, they want to come to Nigeria because there will be demand for their what? Goods. There will be demand for their what? Goods. Period of festival. RAM. Which time does RAM go for RAM? Which time do you see people buying? Eid Kabir, isn't it? Eid Kabir, Eid Malud. You find out that in those times, plenty people want to use what? RAM. So the demand for RAM will do what? It will increase. Expectation of change in price. Expectation of change in price. Expectation of what? Change in price. You find out that whenever you hear that the price of petrol is going to increase next week, what will you do? You rush and go and be buying. So that means that the demand for petroleum will do what? The demand for petrol products will do what? It will increase. Because you're expecting change in price. Taxation. If government decides to start taxing every leather shoe imported from Italy, very high, will people be buying it? Once the tax is high, the price of that commodity will increase. So it will make people not want to buy it. Change in fashion. There's this trending trouser that ladies wear now. The one that after getting here, it's now tightens up and gets to the belly. You know that trouser? What do they call it? What do they call it? Okay. So that is fashion. You understand? People would like to buy more of what is fashionable. People would like to buy more of what is fashionable. Anything that is fashionable, you see most ladies, they want to wear it because that's what people are wearing. They will tell their mom, they will tell their dad, this is what I want to wear now. This is what is in vogue. So you see that the demand for fashionable commodities will do what? It's always high. It's always high. Then weather and climate. Raincoat, will it be demanded more in the south or in the north? In the south, isn't it? Because of the what? Weather. There is always rain there. Government policy. If government says that everybody should go to farming, you know, that's what the current government is preaching now. That people should go more to farming. You see that the prices, the demand for tractor, hoes, and things you use in farming will do what? It will increase. Advertisement, very important. Anything that is advertised, people want to do what? People want to buy, so the demand is high. And that's why most companies, they do advert, they run adverts on telly, isn't it? Isn't it? Yes. So that's where we'll stop for today. Make sure you test the attention stop right. Today we are going to be looking at the distinction between change in quantity demanded and change in demand. Distinction. What's the meaning of distinction? Difference. What's the meaning of distinction? Difference. The difference between change in quantity demanded and change in demand. Is that clear? It's a normal question that comes out in exams. You understand? By mere looking at it, when somebody tells you about change in quantity demanded and change in demand, you will think that both of them are the same thing, isn't it? Change in the quantity of the clothes you're demanding and change in the demand for clothes. Is that clear? The two of them technically in economics, they are not the same thing. Is that clear? They are not what? The same thing. Change in quantity demanded and change in demand in economics are not the same thing. Is that clear? Difference between the two. Change in quantity demanded and change in demand. Both of them, you can easily deduce their difference by looking at the graphs. By looking at the what? Look at the graphs. Look at the graphs so that you see what I'm showing you. You can see the difference between change in quantity demanded and change in demand by looking at their what? By looking at their what? Graphs. This is the graph for change in quantity demanded. This is the graph for what? Change in quantity demanded. Whereas this is the graph for change in demand. This is the graph for what? Change in demand. This is the graph for what? Change in quantity demanded. You must use that word change. Is that clear? And this is the graph for what? Change in demand. The graph of change in quantity demanded simply shows movement on the curve. Movement on the what? Curve. Can you see? This is the first instance of demand at the price of 10. The demand was what? 40. But when the price increased to 20, the demand reduced to what? 20. Is that clear? So, change in quantity demanded can only be shown by movement. Can you see where it was before? This is where the demand is before, and this is where it is now. Movement on the demand curve. Movement on the what? Demand curve. Whereas change in demand is shown by a shift in the demand curve. It's shown by what? A shift. Can you see the former demand curve? And this is the what? The new one. Can you see a shift in the demand curve? Whereas this one is shown by what? Movement on the same demand curve. Is that clear? Is that clear? This one is shown by what? Movement on the demand curve. Whereas this one is shown by a total what? Shift of the demand curve. Is that clear? So that is how you show the difference using the graphs. Once you plot the graph, when you notice the movement in the graph, you can easily say that you are talking about change in quantity demanded or what? Change in demand. Is that clear? Then, by way of explanation, change in quantity demanded is the movement from one point to another on the demand curve. That's what I explained about. Movement from one point to another on the what? Demand curve. The cost of change in the quantity demanded is due to what? Changes in price of the commodity under consideration. Is that clear? That is the major cause of change in what? Quantity demanded. You understand? Change in quantity demanded is majorly caused by what? Change in price of the very commodity demanded. Is that clear? Whereas change in demand or shift in demand is the shift of the demand curve to another position entirely. Is that clear? The shift of the demand curve is the demand curve. The shifting to another position. It could be increase or what? Decrease in demand. And you know this one could be caused by so many things, including changing taste of individuals, their level of income, and so many other things. We learned about the factors that affect demand, isn't it? So all of those could be the cause for change in demand. Whereas change in quantity demanded is majorly caused by what? Change in price. Yes, welcome. In economics, you're always going to be asked questions on types of demand. On what? Types of demand. What kind of demand does your shirt have? Understand? What kind of demand does your shoe have? You understand? Types of demand. There are three major types of demand. It could be derived demand, competitive demand, or composite what? Demand. And we're going to explain this kind of demands and give example of commodities that have such demand. Give example of what? Commodities that have such demand. Number one is what we call derived demand. Derived demand. This occurs as a result of demand for other commodities. Derived. You see the word. Can you say understand the word? Derived. You demand for this commodity because you have to use it with the other one. Is that clear? Derived commodity. Anytime you buy bread, it's likely that you buy what? It's likely that you buy what? Butter, because they go together. So you can say that butter has a derived demand from what? Bread. Is that clear? Derived demand. What other things can you use together? If you have a car, you will always use fuel, isn't it? Isn't it? You will always use fuel. If you want to take tea, you will always use what? You always use what? Sugar. Isn't it? Mostly. Take tea with sugar. You take bread with what? Butter. You have what? Car with fuel. That means when the demand for bread is increasing, the demand for butter will also be doing what? Increasing, isn't it? Because butter has a derived demand from bread. The second part is what we call competitive demand. Competitive what? Demand. This occurs when two commodities are fairly close substitute to what? Each other. They are competing. You can give me an example of two commodities that compete. Milo and what? Bombita, isn't it? Two of them are doing the same thing. You can use the two of them for tea, isn't it? So the both of them have what we call what? Competitive demand. As the demand of this one is increasing, it's likely that that for this one will be doing what? Decreasing. Because people will now be rushing to Milo and leaving what? Bombita. Is that clear? What other things have competitive demand? Dangote products like an elephant bar. That's which of their products? Cement, isn't it? So when that for Dangote is increasing, it's likely that that for elephant will be doing what? Decreasing. This is unlike derived demand. When the demand for this one is increasing, this one has to be what? Increasing as well, isn't it? Now we talk about composite demand. Composite demand. This occurs when a commodity is required to serve two or more purposes. You can give me an example of a commodity that serves two or more purposes. Can you give me an example? Example is Gary. Tell me what two things you can use Gary for. And what? Not Gary as such. Cassava. You can give me two things you can use cassava for. You can use it for Gary, isn't it? Or what? Apple. Isn't it? Fufu. You can use cassava to make Gary or to make what? Fufu, isn't it? When you process your cassava very well, it turns into what? Gary. But when you use it after the basic processing, it will be what? Fufu. Is that clear? So, cassava is going to have what we call what? Composite what? Demand. Is that clear? Is that clear? So when the demand of this one, Gary, is high, you can see that the supply of fufu will be what? Low. Because they will be using most of the cassava that is in supply to do what? To do what? Gary. Because people are demanding more for what? Gary. Is that clear? So can you see the difference between the three types of demand? The one that has a direct demand is the one that is needed because something else is needed. Is that clear? Since you're taking bread, it's likely that you always use what? Butter. So as the demand for bread is increasing, the demand for butter is also what? Increasing. Competitive demand, when you're using this one, you're using it in place of this one. This one is a close substitute of this one. So when the demand for Milo is increasing, that for Bonvita will be doing what? Decreasing. Composite demand, one product you can use them for what? Two things, two purposes. Cassava you can use for gari or what? Fufu. Exactly. Yes, let's listen up. Stop writing. Elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand. That's the topic for now. Elasticity of demand. Another word for it is price elasticity of demand. Is that clear? You can call it elasticity of demand or what? Price elasticity of demand. And what does that mean? It simply shows us how the demand of this your shirt will change immediately when the prices of your set increases or decreases. Is that clear? If you are buying petrol, you're driving car, and all of a sudden you wake up and the price of petrol increases, you know that you need your car to go to work. You will still buy the fuel, isn't it? You will buy it. They are selling petrol 140. You wake up tomorrow, they are not selling petrol 145. You buy 150. You still what? Buy, because you are using it to do what? Go to work. You are using your car to go to work, isn't it? Kerosene. You want to cook. They increase the price of kerosene. Will you say you will not buy and cook again? You will. But when you talk about products like Bonvita and Milo, you know that Bonvita is a substitute for what? Milo. All of a sudden, you wake up, you go to market, you have money that you want to use in buying Bonvita, and you now realize that Bonvita has increased. What will you do? You quickly leave the Bonvita and do what? Buy Milo, because you can do without it. There is a substitute, isn't it? Can you say that? The change in price of one of the commodities we mentioned before affected the quantity demanded immediately. There is change. Whereas the other one, the change in price did not what? Affect the quantity, isn't it? Is that clear? The petrol and kerosene we described, the change in price, did it affect the quantity demanded much? You will still buy your, if what takes you to town is 20 litre, you still buy your 20 litre, whether the price changed or not, isn't it? But when you go to market for those goods that have substitute, once they are changing their price, what happens? Their quantity demanded will reduce immediately, because you will go for the other one. Is that clear? And that is what we call what? Elasticity of demand. Price elasticity of demand. And we define it as what? The degree of responsiveness of demand to what? Little changes in price of the commodity. You understand? How the demand responds to what? Changes in what? Price. And we'll say that for some commodity, demand responds heavily. You understand? It responds heavily to the changes in price. But for some commodity, the response is very minimal or even none. Is that clear? As the case of kerosene and the what? Kerosene and the what? Milo. Bookie, be paying attention. I just say something now when I want to ask you. As in the case of kerosene, as against what? Milo and what? Bonvita. Is that clear? Is that clear? So now we look at importance of elasticity of demand. Also, elasticity of demand measures the extent to which the quantity of a commodity demanded by a consumer changes as a result of little change in what? Price of the commodity. That's what I explained before. Now, what are the importance of elasticity of demand? So we can use the knowledge of elasticity of demand to do what? To increase our what? Revenue. You understand? When you know the right products to have. You see that people that are selling petrol, every time they can always sell, isn't it? Because people will always buy. Is that clear? But when you're dealing in business that has competitive demand, or you understand, that has competitive demand, that have substitute, you have to be very careful how you increase your price. You understand? Because once you increase your price too much, your competitor will do what? Your competitor will reduce his own price and sell more than you, isn't it? So you have to be careful how you increase your price. Determination of maximum output. The knowledge of elasticity of demand will help you to determine your maximum output at every given time. Determination of cross elasticity. Imposition of tax by government. Exactly. Imposition of tax by government. So it enables government to know the right commodity to impose tax on. Exactly. These commodities that everybody must use. So if government wants to get maximum tax, what will it do? It will impose tax on that commodity because they know that you must use it. Isn't it? That was the time they used to collect toll gate fee. Where you guys born then? When you're driving from one state to the other, there's a place where they build where you will pay 5 naira or 10 naira before you pass. The person just stopped it a long time ago. You understand? Now, effects of changes in the determinant. Price elasticity of demand or coefficient of price elasticity is the degree of responsiveness of demand towards little changes in price of goods and services. This is what we explain to be the meaning of what? Elasticity. You understand? So, the changes in price has a lot to do with the changes in the quantity of goods demanded, which we are going to explain in further class. We will be looking at coefficient of price elasticity. Is that clear? Coefficient of price elasticity. Yes, we are going to look at types of elasticity of demand. Types of what? Elasticity of demand. We say that the kind of elasticity, the type of elasticity of demand that fuel or petrol has is not the same that Bombita has, isn't it? Two of them have different kinds of elasticity of demand. Why? Because if there is a change, little change in price of fuel or petrol, you keep buying it, isn't it? But products like Milo or Bombita that have substitute, when there is change in their price, you buy them or reducing their quantity demanded and going for the substitute, isn't it? So those classes of demands or elasticity of demand is what we are going to learn today in types of what? Elasticity. Types of elasticity. Number one is elastic demand. We have elastic demand, we have inelastic demand, we have unity elastic demand, and other types. You understand? But first of all, we'll take the first one, elastic demand. What is elastic demand? Demand is said to be elastic if a small change in price leads to a greater change in quantity of goods demanded. Is that clear? Whenever there is a little change in price and you see that the quantity of goods demanded changes, you understand, tremendously. When you have such, we call it what? Elastic demand. So who can tell me an example of goods that have elastic demand? What? Dress. How? From the examples that I have given already, you can pick out the one that has elastic demand. Which one has elastic demand and why? Elastic demand is whenever there is a small change in price, there is what? Large change in quantity demanded. Once you change price, you see people will not buy again. Any commodity that has a substitute, you understand? Whenever there is a small change in its price, you will see a very large change in the what? Quantity demanded. If people were demanding 1,000 before, all of a sudden they can be demanding only what? 1. Because there is substitute, they will leave it and go to the what? Substitute. So you see that all those what's it called? Competitive demand goods that we give, like Milo and Bombita, most of them have what we call what? Elastic demand. Once there is a little change in their price, you understand? People start buying them. And once there is a little decrease in their price, what will happen? Plenty people will want to buy more. So that's the elastic demand. So we'll now say that in this elasticity, it is the coefficient of elasticity E is always what? Greater than what? 1. Greater than or equal to 1, but less than what? Infinity. This is the graph. When there is change in price, can you see the change in price? Price moves from BA to what? BB. Just small, because of this small change in what? Large change in demand. There is large change. Can you see that the space between here and here is bigger than the space between here, isn't it? So this is what we call a fairly elastic demand. You can call it elastic demand or what? Fairly elastic demand. Is that clear? Is that clear? Good. So we're going to look at the second type of elasticity of demand. We're going to look at the what? The second type, known as inelastic demand. Number 2. Inelastic demand. And demand is said to be inelastic if a larger change in price leads to small or slight change in the quantity of goods demanded. Exactly. So when you have such, you have inelastic. Here, the elasticity or the coefficient of elasticity. Whenever I say elasticity, know that it also means what? Coefficient of elasticity is less than 0. That is elasticity E less than 0, but what is greater than 0 but less than 1. So it's negative. This type of elasticity can also what? Be called fairly inelastic. Fairly inelastic demand. Is that clear? So it can also be plotted in the graph like the other one, where we have BA, where we have what? BA and what? BB, and we have Q, QA, and QB. Understand? Whereby here we have the what? Price, and here we have the what? Quantity demanded. So when the price moves from BA, given a quantity of QA, to BB, given a quantity of what? QB. So we have these 2 points. Stop writing, pay attention. So inelastic demand is when a large change in price, you understand, causes a very what? Little or no change in quantity demanded. You can give me an example of a good that does that. The price changed very well, but people still they buy them. You know, to change petrol. You understand? All those products that they are used, that you must buy them. even if there is slight change in price, you see that they change the price of fuel from 87 naira to 140. Still, people are doing what? Because you cannot do without them, isn't it? So those goods that you cannot do without, most of them are have what kind of demand? Inelastic demand. Because what? If there is a what large change in their price, it leads to only small or slight change in the quantity what demanded. People still demand it's almost the same price, it's almost the same quantity. You understand? The quantity never changes a much. You understand? If they continue to increase the price of petrol, and the quantity of petrol you need to get from here to town is 20 liters, you still be buying 20 liters, isn't it? Even when the price is increasing. So if petrol has what? Inelastic what? Demand. Is that clear? So that's what we show in this graph. Can you see the change in price? It will move from all the way from here to here. Understand? But the change in quantity is very small. So the graph is always steep. This graph is always what? Steep. Whereas the graph for the other one is what? It's like this. Even. You understand? That's another way JAMB asks you the question. The elasticity of demand that has a steep curve, is it elastic or inelastic? The one that has a steep curve is what? Inelastic. The one that has an even curve is what? Elastic. Elastic has even curve. Inelastic has what? Steep curve or steep graph. Is that clear? Is that clear? Keep copying. So we're going to look at another type of elasticity. Another type of elasticity, the third one, known as unity or unitary elastic demand. Unitary or unity elastic demand. Demand is said to be what? To be unitary when a change in price leads to an equal change in the quantity of the goods or commodity demanded. Is that clear? So here there is what? Equal is equal. Here the coefficient of elasticity is what? Here the coefficient of elasticity is equal to 1. That is, E is equal to what? 1. Is that clear? It could be shown in this graph where we have price and what? Quantity what? Demanded. So when you have PA and what? PB, isn't it? You can also have what? QA and what? QB, isn't it? This one led to what? This one, and this one led to this one. You have a curve like that. Here E is equal to 1. Leave what you're writing and pay attention to it. So in unity or unitary elastic demand, demand is said to be unitary when a change in price leads to what? Equal. Leads to what? Equal change in quantity of goods. It's equal now. You understand? If the price changes by 5 naira, the quantity demanded will reduce by 5. Is that clear? So when you have such goods, we say that such good has what we call unitary what? Elasticity. Is that clear? Here the elasticity is equal to what? 1. Equal to what? 1. You see the curve. The curve of elastic demand is like this. Isn't it? The curve of inelastic is like this, steep, isn't it? Whereas the curve of this one is at the middle. Can you see it? Can you see the difference? JAMB is going to draw the curves and ask you what kind of demand elasticity. See the thing here. If this is your curve, if you have something like this, what kind of elasticity? Unity. If you have something like this, what kind of elasticity? Elastic. Then if you have something like this, what kind of elastic? Silver. Elastic. Unitary. In what? Elastic. You understand? This one is greater than 1. But this one is less than
1, 0.
Less than 0, but whereas this one is what? 1. This one is 1 itself. But this one is greater than 1. Whereas this one is negative. Exactly. So take it down. Are you done? Let's move to another one. So we're going to look at another type of elasticity. 2 of them are still remaining. 2 are still remaining. 2 are still remaining. 2 are still remaining. And the 2, number 4 is what we call perfectly elastic demand, or another word for it is what? Infinitely elastic what? Demand. And demand is said to have demand is said to be perfectly elastic.
When a change in price brings,
If a change in what?
Price brings about an increase
In price brings about what? An infinite effect on the quantity of what? Goods demanded. Is that clear? So if you have a graph like this where you have the price PA, because of increasing from this point to PA, the quantity demanded continues to what? Change a lot. We call it what? We call it a perfectly elastic what? Demand. Also, very similar to that is what we call perfectly inelastic what? Demand.
or zero elastic demand.
Or another name for it is zero elastic what? Demand. And a demand is said to be a zero or perfectly what?
It's said to be perfectly inelastic.
Or zero elastic what? Demand.
If a change in price
If a change in price
has no effect whatsoever.
has no what? Effect whatsoever
On the quantity of goods.
on the quantity of goods what? Demanded.
So
Here the coefficient of elasticity is what? Equal to 0. Whereas here the coefficient of elasticity is equal to what? It's equal to infinity. Understand? Here it's equal to infinity, here it's equal to 0. So stop writing, let me explain. I'll give you time to write. Can you see these two? In this one, it is said to be perfectly inelastic if a change in price brings about an infinite change in what? Quantity of goods demanded. There are some substitute goods or competitive demand products that have such. Once there is a small change in price, everybody will leave it and say, hey, we don't want them again, or we'll use this one. Nobody will even want to buy at all. There is a change in the quantity demanded because of just a little change in price. You can give me an example of such product. Or another person should also give me example of a product that have perfectly elastic, which is when there is a change in price, it doesn't have any effect on the quantity. This one is very simple to give an example. Give me an example of this one. No. Water. Even if you increase the price of water to 1 million, will you not still use water? Will you not use water? Does water have any substitute whatsoever? Is there anything that you can use in place of water? So even if the price of water keep changing, they sell pure water from 5 naira, 10 naira, 20 naira, any amount, will that reduce the amount of water you take? So the change in price of water does not affect whatsoever the number of demand. You understand? You will always use water to do what? Bath. You will use it to do what? Cook. You understand? So those things that are very, very important, they tend to have perfectly inelastic what? Demand. Is that clear? So what are those things that once you change their price, nobody will even near there again? Or once you reduce their price, people will leave the other one and go to it. This one could also be seen in it's likely. Cement is likely. If you leave tomato, what will you go to? Check for me those that fall in this class. Is that clear? So this is the curve. This is the graph for this. Once there is change in price, the quantity demand continues to do what? It's too large. Brings about an infinite. It continues. It doesn't stop. Is that clear? Whereas this one does not have any effect on the quantity demanded. Yes, we looked at what kind of utility did we look at? What kind of utility did we look at first? Marginal. And what is marginal utility? Additional utility, you understand? Now we're going to look at the total utility. Total utility is the amount of satisfaction, the total amount of satisfaction a consumer derives from consumption of a commodity at a particular time. We say that marginal utility is the additional satisfaction derived from consuming additional quantity of a particular good. But total utility is the total satisfaction, the total amount of satisfaction a consumer derives from the consumption of a commodity at a particular time. It is calculated using the formula average utility times quantity consumed. Is that clear? Whenever you do average utility times quantity consumed, you get what? Total utility. And the graph looks exactly like this. Can you see? It has a parabolic curve. Whereas this is the graph of what? Marginal utility, almost a straight line, this form. This one that usually looks like a parabolic curve is the graph of what? Total utility. Is that clear? Because the total utility you derive from something. From first drinking the water, you derive very big amount of utility. Then after some time, it will start what? Becoming constant. Is that clear? Now we look at average utility. What is average utility? Average utility is the satisfaction which a consumer derives per unit of the commodity consumed. Per unit. What satisfaction do you derive in the one you consume per unit? You understand? Satisfaction per unit, that is what we call average utility. And how is it calculated? By simply saying total utility all over what? Quantity consumed gives you the average utility. And the graphs looks like exactly like this. If you have plot units of utility against quantity consumed, you have a graph like this. It's a curve, but a what? Negative curve. Is that clear? So this is average utility. Average utility. Average what? Utility. Very important. Pay attention. You're going to be learning indifference curves. Indifference what? Curves. Very important curve in economics. You understand? Indifferent curves is indifferent curve is a curve that shows the possible combination of two commodities, each yielding the same satisfaction or utility to the consumer. Is that clear? Possible combination of two commodities, each yielding the same what? Satisfaction or what? Utility to the consumer. I told us that henceforth, whenever you hear the word utility, it simply means the same thing as what? Satisfaction. Utility simply means satisfaction. It's a simple way of explaining satisfaction in economics. You understand? So, any curve that shows the possible combination of two commodities, X and Y. Can you see them? X and Y. When you combine the two, giving you the same amount of what? Utility or what? Satisfaction is the what? Indifferent curve. And this is how the curve is normally shown. Is that clear? Indifference curve, X, it will have X, it will have Y. You understand? Combination of X and what? Y. To give you these curves. Is that clear? So whenever you have a curve like this, showing the two commodities with this such slope, you understand? It indicates what? Indifference curve. It indicates what? Indifference curve. Diminishing marginal utility and the law of demand. Diminishing marginal utility and the what? Law of demand. I told you that the marginal utility, the extra utility that you derive from drinking extra water, after you must have drank full cup of water when you are thirsty, the extra satisfaction you derive is lesser than the one you derive when you just took the initial cup of water when you are very thirsty, isn't it? So the more water you take, the lesser the satisfaction is giving you, isn't it? But that bulk one, the first initial one you took when you were very thirsty, you derive very large amount of satisfaction. But as the quantity you take, consume increases, what? The satisfaction continues to what? Decrease. Is that clear? The law of diminishing marginal utility states that the satisfaction derived from consuming successive units, that's additional units of a commodity, will do what? Diminish. Diminish simply means it will do what? Reduce, decrease. As the total consumption of the commodity does what? Increases. So when you continue to consume more water, the satisfaction it's giving you will continue to do what? Reduce. The same thing, when you continue to consume more cups of milk, the satisfaction will be doing what? Diminishing. Can you see it? This is the diminishing returns curve, utility curve, diminishing utility curve. As the number of milk consumed is increasing from 1 to 6. Is that clear? As the number of milk consumed is increasing from 1 to 6. The what? The marginal utility is what? Decreasing from 10 to what? 2. Is that clear? Is that clear? So therefore you can say that the total utility increases as more commodity is consumed, but it increases at a what? diminishing rate. It diminishes. Is that clear? Is that clear? Good. We are going to look at consumer equilibrium, consumer what? Equilibrium, and consumer surplus and its what? Application. How do you apply consumer surplus? What is consumer surplus? What is consumer equilibrium? You understand? How do you explain the concept of consumer equilibrium? Consumer equilibrium is what happens or what occurs when there is a balance between quantity demanded and supplied. Is that clear? It represents a situation where there is no tendency to do what? Change. You need 1 pack of milk. You understand? Whenever you go to buy, you can always get 1 pack of milk. You understand? What you need, what you demand for, what you need and you have money to buy, that is demand, isn't it? What you demand for is what you can be what? Get. Is what can be gotten by you or what you can get. You understand? That's when we say there's what we call consumer what? Equilibrium. Anything you demand in the market, you can do what? You can get them. You can get it supplied. Is that clear? Whenever what can be demanded by you can also be supplied to you, then you have what we call what? Consumer what? Equilibrium. If you're getting what you want, will you change? There will be no need for what? Change. You understand? Because the amount of quantity of a particular commodity you want and you have the money to pay, you demand for it, you can get it. Or you can have it what? Supplied. So in that situation, we have what we call what? Consumer equilibrium. Whenever the amount of a given commodity demanded can be supplied, you have what we call what? Consumer what? Equilibrium. Now the second concept, consumer surplus, and how it can be applied. This is the difference. Consumer surplus is the difference between the amount a consumer budgeted to pay for a particular commodity based on the expected level of what? Satisfaction, and the actual amount he paid to have that what? Commodity. Is that clear? Let's say you budget to pay for a commodity 100 naira. You budget to buy milk 100 naira. And all of a sudden, you now went and you paid you bought it how much? 18 naira. What would be the consumer surplus? 20. You understand? The difference between this one, consumer surplus is what? Difference between the amount the consumer budgeted, which is 100 naira, and what? The amount he actually paid for, which is 80. So the difference between 100 and 80 is what? 20 naira. So this 20 is the what? Consumer surplus. Is that clear? And this is the graph that shows the consumer surplus. We have the price against what? Units consumed. This upper part is known as the what? Consumer surplus. Whereas this lower part is the what? Total expenditure. Once this is the market price, once you buy, every other thing up is the what? Consumer what? Surplus. Is that clear? So this line shows you the consumer budget line. The budget is made. Is that clear? And this single straight line shows you the what? Market price. I hope that is clear. Yes, we are going to be looking at the theory of supply. The theory of what? Supply. Previously, we learned about demand, isn't it? I would say that demand is what? The ability and willingness, isn't it? The ability and willingness to demand for or to ability and what? Yes, that is what demand is. You understand? You have to be what? Able and willing, isn't it? If you want something but you don't have the money to have it, is that demand? That is not demand. For you to make a demand, you have to be able and what? Willing to have something, isn't it? At a particular point in time and at a particular what? Price. That is demand. But here we talk about supply. What is supply? Supply is the quantity of a commodity which a producer is willing and what? Able to offer. Not the one that he is willing to offer, but the one that is willing and what? Able. to offer for sale at a particular price and at a particular period of time. That is what supply is. Exactly. Demand is the one that you're willing and able to what? To buy, to have for yourself. Whereas supply is the one, the quantity of a commodity which a producer is willing and able to offer for sale at a particular price and at a particular period of time. That is what supply. Supply is the quantity of a commodity which a producer is willing and able to offer for sale at a particular price and at a particular period of time. That is what supply is. You understand? Say a producer of t-shirts like this one I'm wearing, a producer of it, you understand, is willing to bring 1,000 pieces for sale in the market. He's willing to bring 1,000 pieces. Is he making a supply of 1,000 pieces? Is he making a supply when he's willing? He's just willing to bring 1,000 pieces. He's not. But when he's willing and he's also able, that means he already has it. He's ready to bring 1,000 pieces to the market so that people can come and buy. Then he's doing what? He's making what you call supply of 1,000 pieces of this shirt. So supply does not end at willing or wanting to supply, but it also includes wanting and being able to bring it to the market. So when you talk about supply of petroleum products, you're talking about the amount of petroleum products that the petroleum product suppliers are willing to bring to the market. The ones that are already in the market that are now waiting for people to come and do what? Buy. That is what? Supply. Is that clear? You cannot say that you have adequate supply of electricity when you don't have electricity for people to buy. You need to have it first, you understand? So that people who are willing to buy, who are willing to make demand, once they bring their money, you give it to them. That's when you can say that you can be able to do what? Make supply of, or make adequate supply of electricity. Is that clear? And supply is governed by a law known as the law of supply. It's governed by a law known as the what? The law of supply. And this law of supply simply states that all things being equal, the higher the price, the higher the quantity of a commodity that will be what? Supplied. The higher the price, the higher the quantity of a commodity that will be what? Supplied. That's what the law of supply says. Is that clear? Now, how do you explain this law? If I am a producer and I'm producing this shirt and I have another shirt like the one you're wearing, I'm also producing and supplying these two. You understand? If I'm making more money or the price on this shirt is 2,000, whereas the price on your old shirt is 100 naira, which one will I be willing to supply more? The one that costs 2,000 because I want to make more money, isn't it? So that's why the law says that the higher the price, the higher the quantity of a commodity that will be what? Supplied. Producers want to supply the quantity that they make more money in, isn't it? The money that you can pay the highest price to get. That's what they are willing to do or supply. Is that clear? And that is why the law states that all things being equal, the higher the price, the higher the quantity of a commodity that will be supplied. Is that clear? Producers always want to supply. They always supply more of the products that have the higher price. Another way you can state this law is by saying that the lower the price, the lower the quantity of the commodity that will be what? Supplied. Is that clear? If this shirt costs very low price, I will not be willing to bring more quantity. I will bring in less quantity for people to buy if I'm the producer of the shirt. Is that clear? And this law is often regarded as the second law of demand and supply. You know that demand and supply go hand in hand. The first law, which one is the first law of demand and supply? The law of demand, which states that the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. Is that so? Or the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. That's the first law of demand and supply. Whereas the second law of demand and supply is the law of supply, which states that all things being equal, the higher the price, the higher the quantity of the commodity that will be supplied. Is that clear? Is that clear? This whole thing, are they clear? First of all, say that supply is the quantity of a commodity which a producer is willing and able to offer for sale at a particular price and at a particular period of time. Is that clear? Thank you. Yes, just like we have demand schedule in economics, we have demand schedule, isn't it? I will say that demand schedule is it's a table that shows the relationship between quantity demanded and what? Price. Quantity of a commodity demanded and price. Any table that shows such relationship, call it what? Demand schedule. In the same way, we have what we call supply schedule. Supply schedule. What is supply schedule? Supply schedule is also a table that shows the relationship between what? Price and quantity of a commodity supplied. Is that clear? Any table that shows this relationship between price and what? Quantity supplied is known as what? Supply schedule. And we say that as price increases, the commodity supply, the quantity of this commodity supply, quantity does what? Increases too. Isn't it? Unlike in demand, where the price increases as the quantity increases. But in supply, as the price increases, the quantity supply does what? Increases. So supply schedule is the table. Any table. Can you see this table? This is a supply schedule table. From this table, you can see that as the price decreases from 120 to 40, the quantity of bags of flour supply does what? Decrease too. Isn't it? And that is the law of supply. The law of supply says the lower the price, the lower the quantity what? Supply. Is that clear? So any table like this showing you the relationship between the price of a particular commodity, in this case a flour, bag of flour, and the quantity supply is known as what? Supply schedule. Any table showing you the relationship between price and quantity supply is known as what? Supply schedule. Is that clear? Is that clear? We have two types of supply schedule. We have what we call individual supply schedule and market supply schedule. Is that clear? This diagram is a diagram of individual supply schedule, whereas this one is a diagram of what? Market supply schedule. Can you see the difference? Individual supply schedule is telling you about the supply of one person. In this case, the name of the person is not written. You understand? But let's say Mr. Obi. You understand? He's a supplier. Or here, Abu. Abu is the name of the person that supplies this flour. Abu can supply 60 bags of flour at the price of what? 120 naira. You can supply 50 bags at the price of what? 100. This is a supply schedule for Mr. Abu. But here you have how many people? Mr. Toby, Mr. Edet, Mr. Musa. All of them supplying at different what? Prices. At this price, Mr. Toby can supply 60 bags at the price of 120. But at that same price of 120, Mr. Edet can supply what? 90. At that same price of 120, Mr. Musa can supply what? 80. So what is the total supply in the market? 220 at the price of what? 120. When the price reduces to 100, Mr. Toby can supply 50, Mr. Edet 80, Mr. Musa 60, giving a total supply of what? 190 at the price of what? 100. So this table is showing us the supply schedule for the supply ability of how many people? 3 people. And that's why we call it the what? Market supply schedule. It's not for one person. The one from one person, Mr. Abu, is known as what? Individual supply schedule. Is that clear? So what is individual supply schedule? Individual supply schedule shows different quantities of a commodity. Different quantities of a commodity which a producer offers for sale at a particular period of time at various prices. Which a producer, who is the producer for this individual schedule? Mr. Abu. You understand? So this schedule is showing us the different quantities that you can supply at various prices at a particular time for an individual producer, which is Mr. Abu. Whereas market supply schedule is a schedule of all producers. All producers. These are all the producers, Mr. Toby, Mr. Edet, and Mr. Musa. Or all suppliers of a commodity in the what? Market. Which commodity are they supplying? Bag of what? Flour at these various prices. You understand? So this one is talking about many suppliers, whereas this one is talking about what? One supply. So that's why we call this one that talks about one supply, individual supply schedule. And the one that talks about many suppliers, we call it what? Market supply schedule. Is that clear? So we said already that supply is what? Supply schedule is a what? A table that shows the relationship between what? Quantity and what? Price. Is that clear? When it is for one person, we call it individual supply schedule. But when this table is for more than one person, Toby, Edet, Musa, we call it what? Market supply schedule. Is that clear? Thank you. Yes, we look at supply curve. Just like we have demand curve, we also have what? Supply curve. I would say that supply curve is a graph. A what? Graph that shows the relationship between price and what? Quantity of a commodity supplied. Is that clear? When we learn about demand curve, we say that demand curve is also a graph that shows the relationship between the quantity demanded and what? Price. But this time around, we're talking about quantity supplied and what? Price. That is what supply curve is all about. A graph that shows, can you see this graph? This is a graph that shows the relationship between price and what? Quantity supply. You understand? That shows us that at the price of 20, the quantity supply is only 10. At the price of 40, the price quantity supply increased to what? 20. At the price of 60, the quantity supply increased to what? 30. So it's simply showing us that as the price increases, the quantity supply does what? Increases. Unlike the demand curve, the demand curve that is like this, which is negative. Supply curve is what? Like this, because as the price increases, the what? Quantity increases. But for demand, as the price increases, the quantity supply does what? The quantity demanded does what? Decreases. Is that clear? So supply curve is a graph showing the relationship between what? Price and what? Quantity supply. Is that clear? So this is an individual supply curve. You understand? Individual supply curve that shows the supply of Mr. Abu. You understand? Whereas this is a what? Market supply curve. Market supply curve that shows the total quantity supplied of different products by Mr. Edet, Mr. Musa, and Mr. Toby. Is it not? Their total quantity supply against their what? Price. Is that clear? So it will have individual supply curve or what? Market supply curve. Is that clear? So you can actually derive the supply curve from what? From where? From the what? Where do you get the supply curve from? You get the supply curve from the what? Supply schedule that will land the other time. You understand? When you plot the table of a supply curve, you can get what? If you plot the table of a supply curve, if you plot the table of a supply schedule, you get the supply curve. Is that clear? So the supply curve is gotten from the what? Supply schedule. Understand? So you can put it is gotten by plotting a supply schedule. So what did we say that supply schedule is? A table, isn't it? That shows the relationship between price and quantity supplied. Whereas supply curve is a what? Graph showing the what? Relationship between price and what? Quantity supplied. Is that clear? Price and what? Quantity supplied. Yes, we are going to look at the factors affecting supply. What are those things that determine the quantity of a particular commodity that can be available in the market for individuals to come and buy? What are those things that can determine the amount of supply you want to make? If I'm a producer of this shirt, what are the things that will make me to produce more of this for people to buy? What are the things that will affect my producing this to bring it to the market? Number one is price. If the price of this my shirt increases, you see me, I will produce more and be pushing it to the market because I want to make more money, isn't it? So price affects the amount or the quantity of a commodity that can be done what? Supplied. Is that clear? If the price, I see that the price is crashing, it cannot even give me enough money to use in buying the raw material I use. Will I still be producing? My supply will be very low. Is that clear? Now, level of technology. If I'm using mechanized farming, the quantity of apple or cassava that I can push into the market and the quantity of cassava that somebody that is using hoe and shovel to cultivate, which person will supply more? The person using technology, using what? Mechanized farming. And that's why Nigeria is encouraging people to go to farm, buy tractors and do more, because they want the supply of rice to be high so that people can see food to buy and eat. Is that clear? Number 3, cost of production. If the cost of producing this shirt is too high, will I be producing it more? And no, I will be discouraged. So the supply will be low. So cost of production affects what? Supply. Number 3 is government policy. Government policy affects supply greatly. Now you see that the government is encouraging agriculture. So people will go into agriculture and there will be more supply of food. Is it not? If government policy does not encourage that, will people go into agriculture? No. Weather. During the rainy season, there is more cultivation and there is more supply. Is it not? In places where they have good weather for a particular commodity like granite, you see them supplying more. Is it not? So weather affects the quantity of supply. Taxation. Those things that government tax more, will people go and bring them to supply? No. If government is taxing more on Tokumbo cars, people will not go to buy Tokumbo. People will not bring it to Nigeria for people to buy. You understand? So suppliers will be what? Discouraged when there is high taxation. Number 7 is price of other commodities. If the price of other commodities are very high, you understand? You will want to bring in your own because people will buy your own more, isn't it? But if the price of other commodities are low, you might be discouraged to bring your own because people might not buy when you bring it at high price. Now, number of producers. If the number of producers for a given commodity is more, what will do to the supply? The supply will be more. If there are 1,000 people supplying this shirt, when you go to the market, this shirt will be plenty, isn't it? There will be more supply in the market. Natural disaster. Whenever there is natural disaster, there is less supply of materials, isn't it? Because natural disasters like earthquake, flooding, they destroy crops, isn't it? They can even destroy warehouses, isn't it? So it will reduce the supply of what? Commodities. So these are the factors that what affect supply. So you should be able to tell me whether these factors have a negative or positive impact on the number of commodity or the quantity of commodity supply. Is that clear? Thank you. Yes, lastly for today, we are going to be looking at the distinction between change in quantity supply and change in supply. Is that clear? Change in quantity supply is not the same thing as change in supply. Two of them are not the same thing. You understand? And it can easily be seen from their graphs. From their what? Graphs. This is a graph of change in quantity supply. Can you see it? There's only one curve. Is that clear? Only one curve. But this is a graph of what? Change, shift or change in what? Supply. You understand? Whenever you're talking about change in quantity supply, you're talking about movement from this point. Can you see this point? What is the implication of this point? At the price of 20, what is the quantity supply? 30. So it moved from this point to another point where at the price of 50, the quantity supply is what? 40. Is that clear? So movement on the curve. This is one curve, known as the what? The supply curve. If it moves from one point of the curve to another point, then we are having what we call change in quantity what? Supply. Because there is a change in quantity supply. The quantity supply here was what? 30. But it has changed to what? 40. Is that not clear? Quantity supply here is 30. Quantity supply here is what? 40. Due to the changing what? Price. Is that clear? But here we have what we call shift or change in supply, which is the total movement of this supply curve. Can you see the supply curve here? It moved from one point to the what? Other. this total movement of the curve to another point. This is S2, supply curve 2. So here we have two supply curves, isn't it? Because there is a movement from this one to this one. But here there is only one supply curve, but there is a movement from one point on the curve to the other. Is that clear? And that is the whole essence of the distinction between change in quantity supply and the change in what? Supply. Change in quantity supply is the movement from one point to another on a supply curve, another on a what? Supply curve. And it could be increase or what? Decrease. Understand? But now we have what you call shift or change in supply, which is the shift an entirely new position. This supply curve is shifting to it's of two types. It could be what? Increase or what? Decrease. Is that clear? So whenever you have two supply curves, have one. You are talking about what? Change in quantity supply. Is that clear? So that is the main difference between change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Here there is one curve. It is actually the movement from one point of the curve to the other. Whereas here there is total shift of the curve to a new entirely new position. Is that clear? Yes, today we are going to be learning about elasticity of what? Supply. We have done elasticity of demand, isn't it? Elasticity simply means degree of responsiveness. How the quantity supplied responds to any changes in what? Price. Any changes in what? Price. You find out that if you were demanding for one shirt or 10 shirts, if you are demanding for 10 t-shirts, when the price of t-shirt is 100 naira, you demanded for how many? 10. If the price goes from 100 naira to 1000, will you still demand for 10? You will find out that your money will not be enough to afford 10 again. You might decide to be demanding for how many? 2. You understand? Because of the money you have. So there is always how you do what? Respond to any change in price. Once the price of any commodity changes, your demand for it does what? To change too. Isn't it? In that same way, the supply also changes when there is change in what? Price of the commodity. If you are supplying 1,000 pieces of something when the price is 1,000 naira, all of a sudden they tell you that the price is now 2,000. You want to supply more so that you make more gain, isn't it? Isn't it? So the degree of responsiveness, how you respond to changes in price with your supply, is what we know as what? Elasticity of what? Supply. Degree of responsiveness. Another way of putting degree of responsiveness is simply how you do what? Respond. How you do what? Respond to change in price. So what is elasticity of supply? Elasticity of supply is the what? Degree of responsiveness of what? Supply. So little changes in what? Price of the commodity. Whenever there is a change in the price of the commodity, you will change the amount of goods or commodity you will do what? Supply. If you are supplying 10 when the price is 1,000 naira, when the price becomes 10,000, you want to supply more so that you make more profit, is it not? So how do you respond? Do you supply more or do you supply less? That is what we call what? Elasticity of what? Supply. How you supply whenever there is change in what? Price. How you do what? Supply whenever there is what? Change in what? Price. Is that clear? So there are various ways you can what? Respond. And one of them is what we call, you respond under the principle of what? Elastic supply. There are many of them. And that is what we caption when we say types of what? Price elasticity of what? Supply. Types. How do you supply? How do you respond to price changes? Is that clear? There are many ways. So number one is what we call elastic supply. Is that clear? Number one type of price elasticity of supply is what we call what? Elastic supply. So what happens here? In elastic supply, it occurs whenever a small change in price. When there is small change, they were selling something 10 naira, all of a sudden they change it to 9 naira. You see, there is not small change. When a small change in price leads to a greater change in quantity of what? Goods supply. They change the price from 10 naira to 9 naira. All of a sudden, you are supplying 10,000. You decide to supply only 1,000. The change in price is very little, just from 10 naira to what? 9 naira. You're supposed to change your supply from 10,000 pieces to 9,000, but you change from 10,000 pieces to 1,000. That's greater change in supply. Whenever such thing occurs, you say that it's acting on what? Elastic supply. And another word for elastic supply is what we call what? Fairly elastic supply. You understand? Can you see the little change in price? Just from PO to what? P1. But change in quantity from key O to key what? 1. Can you see it? It's bigger. Can you see this space is bigger? You see, ba? Because of little change in price, you're having a what? Larger change in quantity supply. So in that case, we have what to call what? Elastic supply. We have what to call what? Elastic supply. So we are going to look at the number 2 type of elasticity of supply. It's very clever. Whenever little change in price brings about larger change in quantity, we call it what? Elastic supply. We call it what? Elastic supply. So let's look at the second one. Number 2 is what? Inelastic. So when does this occur? When So this is the second type of elasticity of supply. Is that clear? In the first one, we say that once there is a little change in price, there is large change in what? Quantity supply. But in this case, when there is a large change in price, there is what? Little or small change in quantity what? Supply. Is that clear? So inelastic supply occurs when a larger change in what? Price leads to a what? Small change in what? Quantity of goods supplied. So here elasticity, E simply means elasticity is equal to or less than what? 0, but greater than what? Is equal to or greater than 0, but less than what? 1. Is that clear? It is also called what? Fairly inelastic what? Supply. Elasticity is less than what? 0. Is that clear? So this you can see it from this diagram. PO, QO, P1, Q1. Look at the change in price. Is it large? It's very large. Compared to what it leads to change in quantity, it's very small, isn't it? So in such situation, we have what to call what? Inelastic supply. So write it down. Yes, we've looked at what we call fairly elastic supply, isn't it? Fairly elasticity. Now we're going to look at what we call unity or unitary. We looked at fairly elastic and what? Fairly inelastic, is it not? In fairly elastic, we say that little change in price causes large amount of change in quantity. Whereas in fairly inelastic, we say that what? Large change in price leads to what? Little or small change in quantity supplied. Now, in a situation where we have equal change in price leads to equal change in quantity supplied. Is that clear? If there is 1% change in price, there is also 1% change in quantity supply. When you have such situation, we call it what? Unity elastic or unitary elastic supply. Is that clear? This happens when a change in price leads to an what? Equal change in quantity of goods supplied. Is that clear? They are equal. So that if you have 10 change in price, you also have what? 10 change in quantity supply. 10 divided by 10 is what? 1, is it not? So the elasticity here is equal to what? 1. Is that clear? So that is when we have what we call unity or what? Unitary elasticity. So how do you see it? Can you see P1 to P2? Can you see the distance between P1 and P2 is almost equal to the distance between what? Q1 and Q2. Is that clear? So you take note of this. Whenever you have the distance equal, then you know you're having what? Unity or what? Unitary elastic supply. Is that clear? And that brings us to the other type of elasticity of supply known as what? Perfectly what? Elastic or infinitely elastic what? Supply. When does this happen? This happens when a change in price brings about what? Infinite effect on the what? Quantity of goods supply. Just small change in price. Quantity of supply infinitely. It goes without ending. Can you see it? This one is like this. So this one brings about it. This one brings about it. But this one is infinite. When you change the price from 10 naira to what? 11 naira. Now, instead of initial quantity they were supplying when the price was 10 naira, they were supplying 50 pieces of marker when the price is what? 10 naira. Now they went and made the price 11 naira. Exactly. The price now is 11 naira. So instead of supplying 50 pieces or 51 pieces, they are now supplying 1 million pieces. Because of just small change in price from 10 naira to what? 11 naira. At the price of 10 naira, they were supplying how many? 50 pieces. Then at the price of 11 naira, they are supposed to supply maybe 55 or 51. But now they are supplying how many? 1 million or 2 million. Just because of that 1 naira increase. People now say, hey, this thing is now yielding gain. Let's keep supplying it so that we can be selling and be making profit. You understand? The change or the difference in the quantity supply is so large. Then we have what we call what? Perfectly what? Elastic supply. Is that clear? Now we look at the last. Now we do what? We look at the last. And the last is what we call what? Perfectly in what? Inelastic. Or you can call it what? Zero what? Zero elastic what? Supply. This is the last form of elasticity of supply. When does this happen? When a change in price has no effect whatsoever on the quantity of goods supplied. Here, elasticity is equal to 0. How do you represent it in a graph? You have here as 0 and you have here as what? Price. And you have here as what? Quantity what? Supply. It goes like this. When there is what? QO S E is equal to 0. That is the representation. Pay attention. Can you see this situation? When a change in price has what? No effect whatsoever on the quantity of goods supplied. The price of this is 100 naira. And I'm the supplier. Because it's 100 naira, I'm supplying 50 pieces of it to the market so that people can buy, so that somebody like you can buy. Now there is a change in price of this from 100 naira to what? 200 naira. Is that clear? I'm still supplying 50 pieces. They change the price to 1,000 naira. You know I'm supposed to supply more so that I'll make more gain. I still supply 50 pieces. I did not change the supply. You understand? No matter the change in price of this, I'm still supplying only what? 50 pieces. In that case, the kind of elasticity is what we call what? Perfectly inelastic. That means change in price does not affect the quantity supply. So that's why I say when the change in price has no effect whatsoever on the quantity of goods supplied, then we're having what we call what? Perfectly what? Inelastic. In that case, elasticity is equal to what? 0. And this is how you represent it in a graph. Is that clear? The quantity remains what? Constant. No matter the price. Even if the price moves from here to here, the quantity is still the same thing. Q0. It doesn't change from Q0. It remains. Is that clear? That is what we know as what? Perfectly what? Inelastic. Another word for perfectly inelastic supply is what? 0 elasticity of what? Supply. Is that clear? Write it down. Yes, we are going to look at the factors that affect elasticity of supply. What are those things that determine how you respond to changes in price? You understand? If you're a producer or you're a supplier, what are those things that determine how you will supply when there is little change in price? Is that clear? If you are the person that is making this marker, you understand? And all of a sudden there is a little change in price of this marker, or there is a large change from 10 naira to 20 naira. What are those factors that determine how you will either reduce the amount of goods you supply to the market or increase the amount? What are those things? Number one is what we call cost of production. Is that clear? if you're using a very high cost to produce one pieces and all of a sudden there is change in price, you see that it will affect the amount you supply to the market, isn't it? So cost of production affects. Another thing is what we call nature of commodity. Nature of commodity. You know that there are some commodities that are called perishable goods and some are called non-perishable. Give me an example of a perishable commodity. Tomato. Example is what? Tomato. You're supplying tomato. Tomato, when you keep it small time, you don't spoil. No bien. Tomato spoils very easily. You understand? So when there is change in the when there is change in price of tomato, you understand? Tomato is not something that you leave in the warehouse for a very long time. If you say, I know the price don't increase, let me just supply very little. When the price increases, I will supply more. What will happen to that your tomato? It will spoil. When it spoil, you no go even make the 1 naira where you for make if you have supplied it even when there is change in price. Yeah. You understand? So tomato is not something you go and say, hey, the price don't increase, make I leave am for warehouse. Later when the price increase, I will supply more. Will you do that? Now you go chop am if you keep am inside your warehouse. So you find out that even if the price is fluctuating, you'll be doing what? You'll be supplying it because of the nature. If you keep it in the warehouse, it will do what? Spoil. So you continue supplying. Another thing is what we call cost of storage. If the cost of storage is so high, there will be no need hoarding it, isn't it? If it costs you much to store, you want to, like now, if your goods lands in the wharf, you know there's a cost they call demurrage. The more you leave it in the wharf, they will be collecting money from you. So the best thing is for you to do what? Get it out and supply it to the market. Let people buy it. Is that clear? Then another thing is what? Time. Time affects the what? Elasticity of supply. Time affects how you bring your commodity to the market. You understand? You have to consider time. If it takes too long, then you have problem with the gain you make. You understand? You have problem with meeting other challenges. Then we have what we call market discrimination and what? Availability of what? Storage facilities. If you don't have storage facilities, will you be holding your commodity and saying, I will wait on the price increases to supply? You will not. When you don't have storage facility, what do? You sell out. Is that clear? You sell out immediately. That's what you do. You sell out immediately. Theory of price determination. Theory of what? Price determination. How are the prices of goods determined? Is that clear? The price, one of the most important prices in Nigeria is the price of petroleum products. Is the price of what? The price of fuel. You find out that whenever there is an increment in the price of fuel, there could be riots. There could be what? Protests. You understand? People don't play with the price of fuel in Nigeria. It's very, very important to them. Because once there is increment in the price of fuel, you find out the prices of everything starts to do what? Increase. So how do we determine the price of fuel? Do we allow the government to say the price of fuel now is now 145 naira, it's now 60 naira, it's now 19 naira? How? Or do we allow the importers of fuel to import the fuel and sell at any time at their own prices, so that there will be what? Competition. If you're selling 100 naira, people will not buy from you. They will go and buy from the person selling what? 60 naira. How do we determine the price of fuel? How do we determine the price of other commodities? That is what we learn when we study what? The theory of what? Price determination. The theory of what? Price determination. How do you determine fuel? The price of fuel. How do you determine the price of yam? Economists tell us that the best way to determine the price of commodities is to let the natural forces of demand and supply, the natural market force, to determine the price. Is that clear? The natural what? Market force. That's the best way to determine price of commodities. You understand? Let them be free to buy from the person selling the least amount. You see that everybody will go and be selling at that small price. You understand? If somebody is selling 100 naira and this other person is selling 150, and you're selling 15 naira, who would they be buying from? You that is selling 50. So you find out that all those people selling 100 and 150, they will reduce their prices to what? 15 naira. And that, what does that mean? That the price of that commodity that you're selling 15 naira is now what? 15 naira. Everybody will start selling 15 naira. Is that clear? It's not good for government to say this is the price you must sell. Let the market forces do what? Determine. And what is this market? What is market? Market is a point of contact, place, or any means of what? Communication. Where what? Whereby sellers and what? Buyers can do what? Communicate with one another. Any point where buyers and sellers can communicate. Is that clear? In order to do what? Exchange goods and what? Services at a what? Particular what? Price, which is determined by what? Market what? Forces. And I told you that market force simply means the forces of demand and supply. Market forces simply means what? Forces of what? Demand and supply. Give me an example of a market. Gwagwalada market. Example of market is where? Gwagwalada market. That's where we go to buy stuff now. If you go to Gwagwalada and somebody is selling small, just four tomato, 100 naira, whereas the other person is selling 20 or 25 pieces of tomato, 100 naira, who will you buy from? Good. And once everybody starts noticing that that person is selling 20 pieces, 100 naira, is the person receiving all the customers, what will they do? All of them will start selling 20 pieces. How much? 100 naira. And now the price of tomato becomes what? 20 pieces for what? 100 naira. Can you see that? So the market forces is now determining the price of what? Tomatoes. Is that clear? So it's always good to allow market forces to do what? Determine the price of commodity. Is that very clear? Now what is price? This price that market forces is determining, what is it? What is price? Price is what? The amount of money expected or required or given in payment of what? Something. Any amount that is expected of something, or any amount that you pay, you make as a payment for something, is known as its what? Price. So if I buy this 100 naira, what is the price of a marker? 100 naira, because that's the amount you expect to pay. You understand? If you walk into a barber shop to have a haircut, and after having the haircut, they collect 300 naira. What is the price of having a haircut? 300. That's the price. You understand? Any amount that you are expected to pay after a service is rendered, or after a good, or after goods are supplied to you, that amount is known as the what? It's known as the what? Is that clear? Is that very clear? So what determines this price is what? Is what? Market forces. And I tell you that market forces simply means the forces of what? Demand and what? Supply. Okay. Yes, we are going to look at price legislation and its what? Effect. We say that the best way to determine the price of a commodity is by letting the what? Market forces determine. Letting the forces of demand and what? Supply to determine. That's the best way to determine the price of a commodity. If you want to determine the price of this, the best way is to do what? Let the market determine. Let Mr. Olu buy and sell 10 naira, and let Mr. Adeboye sell 5 naira. You see that most people will go to who? Mr. Adeboye to buy, because he's selling 5 naira. And from there you see that Mr. Olu will now bring his price down to what? 5 naira. And then the price of this becomes what? 5 naira. Let the market forces demand and what? Supply. If they demand much for it because your price is low, you find out that most people will go to that your price and start selling. But there is another way of determining the price, using what we call what? Price legislation. This is when government tries to fix the price of something and say you must sell at 1 naira. You find out that when you do that, some people that are supplying it, they will be angry. They might not want to bring it again to the market, and there will be shortage of this. Is that clear? There will be shortage. It's not good for there to be price legislation. But we'll find out that in some certain instances, it will be good to do what? Price legislation. It's good for government to fix the price. Because if you leave people will put exorbitant prices that is not good. You understand? And that brings us to the course known as what? Price legislation. What does it mean? How does government fix price? Price legislation and what its effect? What does it cause? Whenever there is price legislation, what happens? Price legislation, also known as what? Price what? Control. You can as well call it what? Price control policy. It's either you call it price legislation or you call it what? Price control policy. You understand? You can call it price legislation or what? Price control policy. It is simply how the government or its what? Agencies. How the government or its agency does what? Fixes the price of what? Essential what? Commodities. All those commodities that you need very well, like electricity. Without electricity, you cannot stay in your house, isn't it? So electricity is an what? Essential what? Commodity. It is the duty of the government to do what? Fix the price. Because if you leave private organizations, they might just put a price that is so exorbitant that common man cannot afford. So mosquito and heat will be killing you in your house. You understand? So price legislation or price control policy is simply a way whereby the government fixes the prices of what? Essential what? Commodities. So what is the effect whenever government says that the price of this must be 10 naira, the price of this must be 20 naira? What does it happen to the economy? Number one, it encourages hoarding of what? Commodities by the wholesalers and what? Retailers. It encourages hoarding of commodities by the what? Wholesalers and retailers. Whenever government says that you must sell for 100 naira, and they know that if they sell for 100 naira, they will not make gain, what will they do? They will hoard the fuel in their filling station. They will come, they will say, okay, there is no fuel. They want you to go. When you find out that it's so scarce that you cannot get it anywhere, when you come now, they will tell you it's 200 naira. You say, okay, please give me. I need fuel. I have not had fuel since. You understand? It encourages what? Hoarding. Hoarding is a situation whereby a filling station has a fuel, but when a customer comes or when customers come, they will say, we don't have. They are hoarding the what? Fuel, and it's bad. And you can hoard every other commodity. It's not only fuel that you can hoard. Is that clear? So hoarding can be done with several commodities. Number two, it encourages conditional sales of what? Products. Somebody wants to sell to you, it gives you condition. Because the government has already fixed the price. It doesn't allow marketers to do whatever they want. You understand? So they will find a way of making gain. Must find a way. They will start giving conditions and other things. It discourages shortages and might result to queues and what? Racketeering. You understand? It encourages shortages actually, but in some cases it will discourage shortage, but do what? Encourage what? Queues and what? Racketeering. In a situation where the government forces the filling station that you must sell. If I come to your filling station and I dip your tank and I find out that you have fuel and you're not selling, I will close down your filling station. What would they do? They will start selling. Understand? But some people will not even buy the product at all. So any filling station that is selling, what will you see in that filling station? What will you see in the filling station that is selling when others are not selling? Long queue will be in that filling station. Is that clear? Another thing, it leads to what? Creation of what? Black market. You know what black market is now? Whenever there is shortage of fuel in this Abuja, you go from place to place, you see people that are selling black market. And you know what black market means? The prices are they normal. Fuel that you would have bought 5,000 in black market, they will sell it for almost what? 10,000. Because it's black market, it doesn't concern them. It took them very difficult time to get it, so they will put all the prices on top. Lastly, it leads to what? Excess demand and shortage in supply. Is that clear? When government is fixing price, suppliers will not want to supply that goods again. They will say, hey, we are not making profit in this thing, I will not supply again. So people will be demanding, but they will not see what to do, what buy. There will be less supply. So there will be what? Shortage in the market. Is that clear? That's why it's always good for government to Forget about fixing price. Leave it for the forces of what? Demand and what? Supply. Leave it for the market forces to determine the prices of what? Commodities. Is that clear? Is that clear? Thank you. Yes, welcome. Today we are going to be looking at the concepts of total, average, and marginal productivity. We are going to be looking at what? The concept of total, average, and what? Marginal productivity. What is productivity? Really, what is productivity? Productivity. That's the quantity of something that is produced, manufactured, isn't it? If somebody says that you have very high productivity, that means you're making output, you're producing plenty things, isn't it? You understand? So now, what is total productivity? Total productivity, TP, is that clear? Is the total quantity of commodities produced at a particular what? Time as a result of the combination of all the factors of what? Production. Before you can produce, you have to bring out the factors of production. You have to bring them together, is it not? So what are those factors of production? Those things that you need for you to produce. What are those factors of production? Labor. What other factor of production? Capital. What other factor of production? Land. And what? Entrepreneur. Those are the four factors of production, isn't it? Land, labor, capital, and what? Entrepreneur. Land are the natural resources, including the land that you need. Without land, can you start producing? You need a space, a land, isn't it? And you need the natural resources that you use in working, isn't it? Now, labor is the human resources, isn't it? The human beings that work in the factory where you're producing. Without human beings, can you work? So you need labor. So that's why it's a factor of production. Capital is the money and those little things that you need, those assets. Without money and without machines, can you work? So you see that capital is a factor of production. Then lastly, entrepreneur. Well, who are the entrepreneurs? The managers, isn't it? The people that bring out the money and everything. The people that tell you this is how you have to do, this is what you have to do, this is the number of labor you need in this factory for us to make gain. You see the factors of production?
Yes.
So when you bring them together, the quantity of commodity that you are able to produce, when you bring them together, the quantity of commodity that you are able to produce, when you bring all these factors of production, which are what? Land, labor, capital, and what? Entrepreneur. When you bring these quantity of factors together, the quantity of the commodity that you are able to produce at a particular point in time is what we call what? Total productivity. Exactly. If you produce high, 1,000, that means your productivity is high. Or if you produce very little, 10, that means your productivity is what? Low. Productivity is the output that you can give at every particular point in time, having brought the factors of production together. Exactly. And it's given by the formula average productivity times labor. That's how you get it. So JAMB might give you a calculation like this. They will say, if 40 men were employed in a farm and they produce an average of 20 tons of cassava per person,
Yes.
calculate the total productivity. Very simple. Total productivity is given as what? Average productivity times what? Labor. So what is the average productivity of the 40 men? 20 tons. That's what all of them produce on the average, 20 tons. So average productivity times what? Labor. How many people? 40 men, isn't it? 40. So 20 times 40 gives you what? 800 tons. That's the total productivity. Is that clear? Now we look at what we call average productivity. Average productivity. What is average productivity? Average productivity is the output per person. What one person can do. Is that clear? You people are 50 years. And you people, 50 of you produce 100 tons. How many tons can one person do? If 50 people did 100 tons. How many tons do you think that one person can do? 50 people produce 100 tons. If you people were 50 and you were able to produce 100 tons of cassava, then if you're one person, how many tons can one person produce? Huh? No? One person can do 2 tons, isn't it? If one person do 2, 50 of them will give 50 times 2, which is 100. You understand? So the average is what? 2. And that is what we want to learn here. Average productivity. Average productivity is the output per unit of the variable factor. And the variable factor is normally level, isn't it? Or capital, employed. So AP is normally total productivity, TP, all over what? Number of what? Level. So let's say they told you that the total productivity of a group of people, say 40 people, 40 men, is 800. What is average productivity is what? Total productivity all over what? Number of level or number of capital. Is it not? That's what the formula here says. Now they told you that the total productivity is what? 800 tons. And that 800 was done by how many people? 40 men, which is 10 levels. So what would be the average productivity? 800 over 40. Cancel here. 20, isn't it? Can you see that it has resulted to this back to 20? Which is the average productivity here. You see that? So this formula and this formula relates. AP is equal to TP over L. It's the same thing as saying TP is equal to AP times L. Is it not? In your mathematics, you know that if we make AP the subject, this one will go over here and it will be under. So it will now be what? TP all over what? Level equal to what? AP. This formula and this formula are the same thing. You just made AP the subject of the formula. Isn't it? So now we are going to look at another example. We are going to look at another example, and it says, if 3,000 tons of cassava were produced, they are harvested by 60 men on daily basis. Calculate their average output. Example, if 6,000 tons of cassava was harvested by 30 men daily, what is the average productivity? You can solve that for me. Very simple. Solve it. Solve this problem for me before we enter marginal productivity. You can solve that one for me.